And I just heard somebody talking about like our healthcare system, and everybody has something to say about America's healthcare system and how bad it is. Like the deductible is more expensive than what you would pay out of pocket. But the reality is healthcare was supposed to be for desperate needs and dire situations of like, I need a surgery that's going to save my life. And if I don't have insurance, it's going to be $20,000 or whatever it is. Like that's the reason for healthcare. But I think, and you know way more about this than I do, but from the outside looking at it, it seems like now we use that as a scare tactic, right? The reality of me getting hit with a diagnosis that is like life-threatening, that would cost me my life, is still
low.
Yeah, still low, but I'm still paying into the system. God forbid that happens to me, because if it did happen to me, I didn't have healthcare. Now it's like this, I'm chasing my tail and I hate myself that I did that. So it's like this necessary evil. But do you feel like it's fear-mongering, or do you feel like it's a necessity for Americans to have?
No, I mean, this isn't an area where I would say like I'm fully in it, but I highly suspect a lot of this stuff is just, it's a scam, because like I think what Obamacare got rid of was the ability to was to have more flexibility with your insurance. I mean, you could just simply get a catastrophic plan. Like, I want coverage for emergency room care, heart attack, cancer diagnosis, things like that, like true emergencies. And they now bundle that all in with like chronic disease management for people who are obese, diabetes, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that just doesn't work. And so you couldn't even choose to say, I just want the catastrophic plan. I want to pay $500 a month or something like that for my family. It's way cheaper. Now you're essentially paying $2,000 a month, and you're subsidizing a healthcare system that doesn't really work. I mean, our healthcare is terrible. Like, and we're just drugging people with chronic diseases.
Why is that not an option? Like the catastrophic option of I'm going to pay
Obamacare.
Because Obamacare.
Yeah, Obamacare got rid of that. You have to, you can't exclude people with pre-existing conditions. They just standardized it essentially, and then it became really expensive. They didn't push back against like the hospital systems and the insurance companies to bring prices down. They just started subsidizing the premiums, and that's what's been going on in the news over the last couple of months. They're talking like just a couple of days ago. At the start of the year, the Obamacare essentially premiums expired, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, you're cutting people off from things." But
right, yeah.
But it's really like the problem is with the insurance industry and healthcare being so expensive. You don't want to just use taxpayer dollars to just keep on subsidizing a system that does not get good results and costs too much money.
So what was the healthcare system like pre-Obamacare? You were able to do things like purchase a catastrophic package option?
Yeah, so there were options like that for Obamacare, and you could be more selective about, hey, you know, like insurance companies could essentially say, we're not going to take any people with these pre-existing conditions. If you've had cancer in the past, no, this is just for young, healthy people. You could do that. And so that was going on for a long time. But even before that, I mean, health insurance is... I mean, it's been going on for like 100 years, maybe less than that. Before then, it was just like back in the days where the doctor made the house call, like you would just pay the doctor directly. Like it was just fee for service. The doctor came out, you would pay for the help, and then government got involved, and they started to, well, firstly, employers got involved and they were offering healthcare, and now the government's involved, and now we're in the sort of the mess that we're in right now.
And I know you said this isn't like your expertise, but from your perspective, what would you do to fix this system?
I mean, so I think we need to just look at the fact that the healthcare doesn't work. I mean, that's where I would focus. Like, why do we have the worst? Why do we have the most obesity and diabetes like in the country? Like, so much of the money we spend is on chronic disease management, and so I think if we can actually improve the health of the country, the costs will go down, and we'll spend less money on pharmaceuticals. And that's why I like Bobby Kennedy so much, because with the new food pyramid, that's going to have huge impacts on kids, on the military, on senior care homes, places like that. If we can get people eating healthier food, the chronic disease burden goes down, we save money. And so I think that's one major area. And I also think you should be given the choice to choose what type of health insurance you want. I don't think the government should be involved in that.
Yeah.
I think that'll make it cheaper.
I mean, that makes sense, right? But the food pyramid, which is essentially just flipped right now. It's the opposite. It just came out yesterday, 2 days ago. When did it come out? The new food pyramid.
Yeah, 2 days ago. Yeah. I was just down there.
Really?
Doing the HHS celebration. Bobby Kennedy's team, brought a lot of healthcare influencers in, and so we were there for the celebration. But yeah, so right now it's like so it's really eat real food. So it's like no ultra processed food, no added sugar, and then it's they want the biggest part of the pyramid now is fruits, vegetables, meat, and healthy fats. So things like eggs. You don't need to be afraid of eggs anymore. Cheese is okay. Yeah. And then at the top it has whole grains, and so this isn't like refined grains like white bread and things like that. These are whole grain products. And that used to be the biggest chunk of the pyramid. Now that's at the top. They want that to be a smaller proportion of what you eat, with an emphasis on fruits and vegetables and meat products.
Why do you think that? Do they have an explanation for?
Because it just doesn't work. I mean, when we've looked at, and so this isn't just like mental health issues now. This is just like cardiovascular disease and obesity. Yeah. For a really long time, people have demonized saturated fats. And because of that, people say, well, meat products, they're not good anymore. We should be eating breads and pastas and all of that. But since we've been doing that, we're finding it's associated with higher rates of, insulin problem, prediabetes, higher rates of heart disease. And so the reason we're changing it is it just leads to worse health outcomes. Yeah. And refined carbohydrates and carbs, they essentially spike your blood sugar. They lead you become pre-diabetic, and you develop all of these issues. And you don't get that when you're focusing more on fruits, vegetables, and meat products.
My apologies for the interruption, but I had a story I wanted to share with you guys. Today, somebody in the gym came up to me and asked me if you had one supplement to recommend, what would it be? And without hesitation, I said creatine. I've been taking creatine for about 15 years now. It is affordable, it is tried and true, and it works. It is the most by far studied supplement on the market, and there's a reason. There's only one problem, and for me, it's inconsistency with taking creatine. Sometimes I'll take it in the morning, sometimes I won't. The powders are an inconvenience. They don't taste that great. So my solution has been Tasty Gains creatine gummies. I take 3 in the morning and I go on about my day. Creatine works by increasing your body's ability to regenerate ATP, which is the primary energy molecule your cells are using. This is going to help your body with any short form movements such as sprinting, jumping, lifting, but it also is going to help with cognitive function and overall sense of well-being. ATP increase does not just help with muscle building, it's going to help with overall sense of well-being and cognitive function, which I definitely need. If you click the link in our description, Tasty Gains is now running a sick buy one, get one deal. So grab some from us because it helps support the channel and you get yourself some high quality creatine gummies. And now back to the episode. Do you notice a correlation between your patients and an unhealthy diet?
Oh yeah. And it's not just a correlation in my patients. I mean, we now have like clinical trials that have looked at this. I mean, Australia is leading the international community with this research. They run, like, these aren't just population-based correlations. Mm-hmm. They will recruit like 60 patients with depression who have very poor diet as well. And so this is like a concentrated group. And then they randomize one half to Mediterranean diet, which isn't like your pizza and pasta and modern American sort of Italian type stuff. This is essentially lots of fruits, vegetables, low ultra processed foods, low sugar. It's like the diet from the Mediterranean region from like 80 years ago. It's different. Like
the blue area. That's called the blue area.
Exactly.
Diets.
Exactly. Those types of things. So essentially it's just fruit, a lot of fruits and vegetables, fish, things like that. Yeah. Nuts, olive oil. And so one group gets Mediterranean diet, training, nutritionists, and all of that. And then the other group will get essentially like a counseling as well. And so they look at what happens to the same groups, and they find that the group on the Mediterranean diet has a substantially lower rate of depression at the end of this study. And it's 4 times higher than the effect size seen for antidepressants. So it's absolutely huge. I'm looking at your face and I can tell that you're surprised by that. Well, be surprised by this. They then replicated that study again. So the first one was the SMILES trial. They replicated with the Healthy Med study, found the same result, and they replicated it again. Mm-hmm. And so when you have 3 different experimental trials run at academic institutions that find the same thing, that diet is outperforming antidepressants, it's not just something I'm seeing in my patients. This is like statistical correlations that have been replicated. Mm-hmm. So, and when we talk about depression, I want to say this as well, because some people are just like, yeah, right, how is a diet going to fix the fact that I went through a divorce and I can't see my kid? How's diet going to fix the fact that, I lost my job? Mm-hmm. Depression is many different things. Yeah, I think there's all of the intuitive things that we're aware of, like grief, lack of purpose, all of that sort of stuff. But there are so many people out there who they will tell you, I just feel anxious and depressed, and it's coming out of nowhere. It's not in proportion to the stresses in my life. In fact, I feel like I've always felt like this. And it's for that group of people that just feel bad and it's not in proportion to the stresses in their life. Those are the people where if you change their diet and you get them eating healthier food, they feel a lot better.
I want to take a step back, because that makes a ton of sense. Somebody that is depressed, it doesn't seem to matter what their external life looks like, good or bad. Their internal life is in shambles. What does it really mean when somebody says they're depressed? Is it like they all feel the same, or is depression like this umbrella and you can feel different ways and still be considered depressed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is one of the biggest areas of confusion, because you'll hear doctors talk about, this person has clinical depression, right, or something like that, major depressive disorder. It makes it sound like it's this fully distinct entity. And for a really long time, most people thought that depression was due to low serotonin. And that was because of this whole chemical imbalance myth where, hey...
Myth, you said?
Yeah, myth. Because for a long time, doctors were telling patients that depression was a serotonin problem, and that was the rationale for putting them on serotonin-boosting drugs like Lexapro and Prozac and Zoloft. And so, myth, you sort of raised your eyebrows a moment ago. Yes, so even though we've been telling people this for the last 50 years, there's actually no evidence to support that. And we've done everything. So we brought, researchers have brought in patients who have depression and patients who don't have depression, and they've done lumbar punctures where they will stick a needle into the fluid surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. They will pull it out, they will analyze it for serotonin metabolites, and then they'll say, we're expecting to see low serotonin in the patients with depression. It's not there. They do autopsies of people who have had severe depression, they've died by suicide, and they want to look at the serotonin receptors. And then so they do that, and then they compare them to healthy brain tissue. No difference in the receptors.
Wow.
And so it was a myth, because essentially when researchers discovered these drugs back in the 1950s, they knew chemically that they were boosting levels of serotonin. They also knew that the drug effect seemed helpful in people with depression. So they said, well, depression might just be a chemical imbalance because these drugs are helping these people. And so that was kind of the reasoning. And they said, well, just wait for us to find it, guys. We're going to find it soon, but take these medications. That's why we think they work. But there's never been any evidence for that. It's now widely acknowledged by academics. We just haven't told the public.
Why?
Yeah. Well, we don't want to tell the public because it's essentially, it's bad for business.
I guess that makes sense.
Because, okay, so if these drugs aren't acting like insulin for type 1 diabetes, in fact, they're going in and there's this well understood, chemical process where you're okay, low serotonin, we're going to put this drug in there, we're going to boost it up to normal levels.
And now you're good.
And now you're good.
Yeah.
It's that message is very much hey, you don't even have to change your life anymore. There was just this broken part in your engine and we've fixed it now.
Right.
But what these drugs are actually doing is they essentially just have a drug effect. And it can be a therapeutic effect. Like antidepressants, they constrict your emotional range. And if you're super anxious, maybe even anxious to the point of feeling suicidal, if someone just kind of sucks it in and you're not having that panic anymore, that can feel life-saving. It can feel very helpful. but you're not fixing the problem in the machine. You've essentially you're masking symptoms with a drug effect. And people don't like that, because I think intuitively many people are like, I don't want to sweep my problems under the rug.
Right.
I don't want to have maybe I don't know, like a thyroid issue or a dietary issue, or I'm living out of alignment with my life and now I feel bad, and I'm just going to instead of addressing that at its root cause, I'm going to mask these symptoms, or maybe you have relationship problems or a lack of purpose in your life. Instead of addressing that, I'm just going to mask them. People inherently know that's not a great long-term strategy. I mean, things are probably going to get worse if you don't address them.
So it is really, I mean, everybody always says the cliche, you're just slapping a Band-Aid on your issue, but that seems to be what the case is. And I'd be very curious to know if this chemical imbalance, and you say it's a myth, maybe could it be something like, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, normal ranges of serotonin will be 5 to 10. I'm at a 2, you're at a 5, but the way I guess handle or absorb or receive the serotonin is different than how you do. So we could feel the same, but I have lower levels of serotonin. Could that be the issue as well? Is that the end result or the outcome is always different because everybody's individual and how they react to their hormones or whatever are very different? Yeah,
it's a good point, Johnny. And I would kind of drag us away from thinking about it as just serotonin. But so you've heard me talk a lot about dietary issues, exercise, life stresses. But I'm not trying to say that depression and anxiety is always understandable in the context of things you can change in your life. I think that some people are more prone to depression for biological and genetic reasons, but it's just not as simple as it being a problem with serotonin.
Got it.
I mean, you probably had a bunch of when you're at school, you probably notice some people, hey, this guy's a bit more of a nervous guy. She's a bit more of a nervous Nelly. This person seems to be less anxious, maybe even a little bit reckless over there. Maybe they need a little bit more kind of anxiety.
Yeah, sure.
And so we have this bell curve of these different levels of anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And so I think some people may just be more on the anxious side. I don't think there's anything, I think it's hard to say that's pathological, because even people who are more anxiety prone, maybe a bit more conscientious and reserved, I mean, there still is a survival benefit. I mean, we evolved in tribes. Yes, we need people who are a bit more reckless and foolhardy and can go and do risky things, but we also need people who are a bit more conscientious and reserved and kind of worried about things. Yeah. And so I do think I think there's just variety in the way we are, but I don't necessarily think it means hey, if you're a really nervous problem, there's something broken with your brain that's wrong, and we need to drug it to fix it. You're just in primal times, you were better served doing one thing over the other if you were less of a risk taker and more self-aware. Maybe you ask more questions and you overthink certain things. And I think now we always blanket, depression is a very scary word. If you were to diagnose somebody with depression, you're I'm broken, I'm a mess. Yeah. But you're saying, it's this scale, and I think everybody has felt anxiety in their life, especially nowadays because of what the lifestyle we're living. So acknowledging the fact that you're not broken, I think that would help people to stray away from automatically saying, I have anxiety, I have depression, I need a drug. Yeah. And so some of these things are cultural. We are in a much more fast-paced life now. And, a lot of people, we're not outside, we're not moving our bodies. We've kind of veered a lot in the last couple hundred years from just living more in alignment with the elements. And in the scale of human evolution, that's if we take the last 1,000 years, that's a really short period of time considering how long we've been around and how long we've evolved over. So, but then there's and I'm going to draw this into two other things that I think are kind of cultural. And the link is that, yes, some people who are maybe more, were more anxious, now that's a problem. And in the past, we wouldn't have seen it that way. We see the same thing with autism. And I don't know if you've been noticing, but there's so many people talking about, I'm not neurotypical. They say that word. You're neurodivergent now. You're neurodivergent. That's what somebody called me. Yeah. And so when we think about this, like what the hell is autism? Like, it's anything from like a kid who is like twitching in a wheelchair who can't talk to apparently Elon Musk, who's like the richest man in the world,
Exactly.
and this is apparently both autism.
Yeah.
But what I think is really going on is we have become such a hyper-connected society that we value the ability to have these like to be very social and plugged in and have this easy way of connecting with one another and to kind of enjoy talking. That now when people don't like that, when they're just like, I'm not this really social person, like that kind of stresses me out. In fact, that kind of drains me of energy. And also maybe I'm not like the most attuned person. I have lived much more of an internal life. I'm not always thinking about, hey, what's he thinking? What's this person thinking? Where are their emotions? And so maybe you put your foot in your mouth sometimes and like you misstep. So as a society, I think we don't value that. And when people feel like they don't live up to it, they're just like, oh shit, what's wrong with me? And they go, oh, maybe I have autism. Maybe that's the reason that I'm not like
that. I can't get into a room and talk to everybody and feel comfortable. I think the majority of people are faking it too. Like you have this issue with, again, like the social media highlight reel aspect of now you're living a life for other people. So you look good on camera, whatever it may be. But majority of human beings will get into a room and have to like trick themselves or force themselves into having a good conversation. And it could be because it leads to a better outcome. Like I just got to break that awkward wall or that awkward tension when I walk in the room. Yeah. And then once I have one conversation, I'm kind of more relaxed and I can bop around and enjoy my time, versus if I never had that first conversation, then I probably would sit in that room the entire time and overthink to myself and be like, I'm bored or I'm tired or I don't want to be here. But it's such an interesting point to like acknowledge that the person that's sitting in the corner that he's not talking to anybody could be content. Like he or she may be fine on their own. They're observing or they're having a good time. They don't have to be the spotlight of the show. Yeah,
that probably wasn't like, to be socially awkward as well probably wasn't like a big deal. Like you could put your foot in your mouth before like Me Too and all the insanity from the last 10 years. And now it's like, oh gosh, this person just microaggressed me, or they said something that could
now
be
so
vaguely sexual, and so it's like instead of being like, oh, I'm a bit low EQ, you're just like, I have autism, I'm neurodivergent.
It makes you feel like, no, I don't want, cool is not the word. It's like seen or heard. Like all these years, I didn't know why I was so awkward in the room, but no, it's because I have autism and you should treat me differently now. But like, why would you? So I had a brain scan. You hear the guy Eamon, Dr. Eamon?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So I had a brain scan from him and I have my opinions on the results or whatever. But I get this brain scan back and they tell me there's different things. I get this, I see my brain, I have a hole here and it should be smooth. And the results, so the diagnosis was like this, whatever, hyper severe ADHD. And the coolest thing about it was they were able to identify that I had some sort of traumatic brain injury that caused maybe some of the symptoms. Sure. And so now they gave me this label of this thing and I'm like, okay, I can now tout around and say, oh, I have ADHD. Like it's this fun thing. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. Like the fact that I have to force myself to do things that are so minute and everybody else can go do them, or they have no issues with memory and whatever these different things that maybe somebody with ADHD struggles with. The population of the world thinks it's like this like fun and cool thing to express, like, oh yeah, look at me, I'm so quirky and different. But why would you want that thing? I wouldn't wish this on anybody. It's the weird dynamic of you want issues to then talk about you having issues.
Well, kind of speaking more broadly, what I've noticed recently is, this is not just me. Everyone has noticed this. In the last 10 years in this country, there's a social currency associated with being like, struggling in a way.
Correct.
Whether you're a sexual minority, whether you're a racial minority, whether you're in a wheelchair or you're disabled or something like that. We have incentivized aligning yourselves with these groups. People make this stuff their identity.
Yep.
And mental illness has been swept up into that. I mean, whenever I hear people talking about depression, anxiety, things like that, it's like, oh my God, it's so stigmatized. There's all these nasty conservatives out there telling people to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Like they're not, everyone's shaming us about the medications. And so they have sort of been swept up into this sort of oppressed class where it's just like, hey, there's something wrong with me. I need special understanding, and don't expect too much from me. And then like the other thing that you were like quirky, but I also see people being like, oh, I'm depressed. There's like this extra like depth of character to me. There's some mystery going on. Like I'm like, and so you get this thing on TikTok where people like put the drugs they're taking like
weirdest thing in the world
in their bio. And I'm just like, this is, and so I look at it and I'm just like, this is really weird. But I guess you get what you incentivize when you incentivize people to be like, hey, align yourself with this oppressed group. We can't criticize you anymore. Anytime we say something nasty to you, you could be like, you're stigmatizing me, or you're racist, or you're homophobe, or whatever it is. Like, I mean, and so now we have all these people like trying to pretend to be like, well, and they're not pretending. They're just like, they're just like, I'm disabled, like, and why would you want that to be the defining feature of who you are? Like,
no clue.
Like, wouldn't you want it to be like, hey, I struggled with these things, but I've overcome it now.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
That's what I want to celebrate. The fact that I've had hardship and I've gone through it.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm just like this injured victim with a broken brain.
Well, you said it right there. I think that was really important, is don't expect much from me. That seems to be the call to action or reason why people are using this as an excuse to be like, hey, I have this, can't expect you to work that hard, but you should still pay me as much. You should still value me as much as the other guy, but you can't expect the same result because I can't do it.
And don't you dare criticize me.
And don't criticize me about it. Yeah. Because you need I'm now in this part of minority that if you criticize me, I'm gonna shout around, and we don't have to go there. But I'm very curious and excited to talk more about your journey as a psychiatrist with medication. And I've never been to med school, obviously, but what is the process like during schooling, and how much room for questioning is there?
So, I mean, medicine is quite hierarchical. Like, I mean, it's kind of sort of like the military. I mean, it is like, if you're a medical student, it's like you don't really question anything. You just you sort of have to learn the ropes before you question them. Mm-hmm. So, and that's like residency as well. And that's fine. I mean, I do think that's okay. I mean, you should learn before you start to question. But
sure, it's another good point.
Yeah. What I noticed was this. Okay, so let me couch it in a broader sense. I went into psychiatry because I liked self-help. I liked personal development. I liked learning about ways to live a more fulfilling life. And then, so when I finished medical school, I said, this could be really cool. I want to learn this. I want to learn to help people with this because I just find this subject matter so interesting. And so I start working as a psychiatrist in Houston, Texas. I was at Baylor right after medical school about 10 years ago. And what I notice when I get there is it's so far from what I would have expected. I would have expected, hey, we're going to be spending a good amount of time understanding our patients, their lives, their problems, whether it's relational things, problems with meaning, whether there's some physical health issues going on that we could help them. And what I saw when I entered there in my internship was the economics of healthcare had led to this situation where you had 15 minutes to see a patient in a visit just to make ends meet, just for the clinic to be profitable. And so you don't really understand the issues in their life. And, you fill out a questionnaire, this person's depressed, and then you say, well, here's this drug. And it wasn't because like the drugs had great evidence behind them. I learned that later. But I just assumed it at the time. Obviously, because we're just dishing out these drugs left, right, and center. Like that must be because they're the best things, and they make the most sense. Yeah. But really, what it was about was like that was the only way you could help people within that time frame. And so so I start internship. I'm noticing this. I'm just like, this seems off. Like, how can we actually expect to help people if we don't understand the problems in their life?
Sure.
And so over the next 18 months, I decide I'm learning more and more. And then I start to question, and I start to ask the questions about the lack of long-term evidence. And I'm just like ostracized pretty much. They're like,
really?
You get treated in a way where it's like, because the doctors, they don't want to admit and just say, hey, listen, like, hey, we actually know there's other things we could be doing, but the economics of this system, like, it doesn't make sense for us. and this is actually really bad, and we wish we could do things differently. They don't say that. They just say, no, these drugs are safe. No, it's fine. Like,
do they try to make you feel dumb?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did these red flags ever arise in school, or at school you're like, listen, I just got to graduate?
Yeah. In school, I don't think I understood it as much. It was only when I was like in the clinic every day watching the patients not get better. Because the other thing with psychiatric meds, which becomes very obvious to most people in mental health care, is that the drugs just wear off over time. Like, you could put someone on an antidepressant and they have like a mood leveling effect and they say, this is great. But 6 months later, they come in and you increase their dose. And usually within like 2 to 3 years, for many patients, they're like maxed out on the top dose. And then they start to say things like, hey, I don't even know what this drug is doing anymore, or it's only working like 10, 20%. And at that point, like, you either leave someone on a drug that isn't doing anything, or you start stacking on more. And this is how you end up with people on 3, 4, 5 different meds, like after like 10 years in psychiatry.
Is this without fail? Like every single time this tends to happen?
No, it's not like, so there's a lot of variety. I mean, sure, there are some patients you put them on like Lexapro and they're fine for a really long time, but they just never fully adapt to it and they still feel the drug effect. But many people, and these are for reasons I don't understand, they just adapt pretty quickly to the drug, and then to keep on getting that effect, you stack it on. I would say that story of the person who just takes like the Lexapro and they sail off into the distance and they're fine for years, that's the minority. I actually don't see that much. I see much more commonly them wearing off over time and just being less effective.
Do you think it comes down to like a desperation? So for example, if I come in and I'm hyper depressed and I need this medication to work, if it doesn't work, I'm out of here. I take this medication, I'm like, thank God. Do you think that person is the one that adapts quicker because they're so dependent versus the person, and I can only speak from my own perspective, is when I was prescribed Adderall, right? I knew I didn't need Adderall to function, but I take Adderall on an as needed basis. And the first time I took Adderall, I'm like, the world is amazing. The colors look brighter. I'm a better version of myself. This is great. I was also very aware that is the reality is that feeling is not going to last, and I shouldn't expect that feeling too. So now I take my Adderall with a different expectation where, the voice is kind of silenced. I'm able to focus a little more. I get work done. It's out of my system. I take a very low dose. So I'm not chasing that high anymore. And again, my question is like, do you think that people are adapting because they're constantly chasing that first hit high, and then we don't get that? They then are doubling down on their depression and anxiety because you're like, oh my God, the one thing that was working for me is now not working anymore.
Yeah, I think you're more likely to want to keep on taking that medication and want to keep on going on higher doses if your way of understanding the issue is like, this is the cure, like this is the thing,
the holy grail of
the holy grail. And so I think that can definitely lead it there. And much like drugs of abuse, because this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I don't see that much difference between psychiatric medications and drugs of abuse in some ways. And that is that the more pain that is going on in someone's life, like the more hopeless that they're feeling, the more uncomfortable they feel on a daily basis, that urge to keep on using and push to a higher and higher dose will be stronger.
Sure.
Because I would be the same if I was in a lot of pain. I mean, you want relief, and so it's also just the level of suffering will drive the desire for higher doses and to want and to eventually agree to higher and higher medications.
That makes sense. I mean, your sober life sucks, so why not never be sober and take these drugs and always chase something? And I know it's not all about money, but money is a huge factor in like the healthcare system and drugs. Why not then say to an individual like, look, you're going to take this medication. It's going to help you for a little bit, but we're also going to couple it with therapy sessions. We're going to couple it with a dietary change. Like, you could still charge a decent amount of cash on that individual. No, like, is that part of practice, or that's just completely void? You're not even considering that sort of stuff.
So we don't have the infrastructure for it. I mean, the majority of mental health care is delivered by family medicine doctors. That's where 80% of the psychiatric drug prescriptions come from.
Wow.
And I think the average is like maybe 7 to 10 minutes of FaceTime. And so if you're like a mental health doctor, a family doctor, spend some time talking about cardiovascular disease, maybe filling out a form, and then you have like 2 to 3 minutes on mental health care. Like, you hardly even have time to coordinate. Like, well, one, you can't even understand the person. Like, the first step is understanding their life.
Sure.
Like, how do you know whether you need to tell them that they need to be physically active, or they need to work on their diet, or that, hey, it seems like your psychological problems, they really surround relationships. We're going to send you to an interpersonal therapist. Or, hey, it seems like your psychological issues have to do with the fact that you're just, you're a nervous Nelly, you're more anxious. We're going to do more stoicism-based cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, where we really teach you to like watch your thoughts,
Yep.
learn them, and learn how to kind of calm down. And so a lot of these different mental health, like non-drug approaches, you actually have to really understand the person and their issues to make sure they go to the right place. And they don't have time to do that.
I mean, think of 3 minutes, catch any of us at a bad time, and you may say, oh, that motherfucker's banged up. He needs some drugs. That's not it. If that's the system, how could that ever work? And then we talked about it before, is like, once you label me as this thing, oh, that man is bipolar. In your head now, you wake up every day saying, well, I'm different, I'm broken. And every time you do something that's maybe a little bit off, there's your excuse. Yeah. I now resonate with that, the fact that I'm putting bipolar in my bio now. And that, how do you fix that? How do you fix that system?
Yeah, I mean, conversations like this, I think, is helpful. And the issue is like you've put your finger on one of the most dangerous side effects of giving someone a psychiatric medication. Because when you give them a psychiatric medication, a lot of people will implicitly start to believe something is broken with my brain, and that's why I need the drug. You rob them of the opportunity to see their problems in a new light, because now it's just like, hey, this drug is what's helping my broken brain. You might say, okay, well, I'm having problems in my relationship because I'm depressed. I feel bad on a daily basis because of my depression. It's not because 50% of my calories are ultra processed food, and I hardly move my body, and I'm in this abusive relationship, and I do this job that's not meaningful. Like, you've completely rewritten the way that person understands their emotional life, because our emotions mean something. We need to be listening to them. They're trying to guide us towards, psychological safety and feeling good. And you lose all of that when it's just like, Johnny, you have bipolar disorder, take your lithium, and like, don't even bring up the other stuff. It's just, it's your broken brain.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What is the major difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, other than you're able to prescribe medication?
So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, that the psychiatrists, so psychiatrists were medical doctors, and so not only do we prescribe meds, we specialize in identifying medical issues that make people feel crummy. Whether that's hormonal issues that have to do with going through menopause, low testosterone in men. Could also be thyroid issues. We also look at like gut health as well. Like, if you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, we can look at your stool, and we could say, hey, your stool is just filled with inflammatory markers. Like, we need to put you on like a GAPS diet or some particular type of diet to bring down inflammation. So we use drugs, but we also really specialize in medical reasons that make people sick. Psychologists, they're much more about your relational issues, and also the way you look at your anxious thoughts and you speak to them.
So I guess in other words, is a psychiatrist simply a psychologist plus, or is it different approaches to handling issues?
It's also different approaches. I probably had 4 psychotherapy patients when I went through my psychiatry residency, and I did a lot of training on psychotherapy, but I don't know, maybe like 50 hours, something like that. But like a psychologist, like they've usually done, they psychology maybe for 4 years, and then they've gone and done like a PhD, or a master's, and so it's just they've done like 6 years of like talking to people, understanding them, and
so it is different. They're separate.
Yeah, they're different.
What would you say the reason would be to go to one over the other?
So I would say, well, some of it depends on the quality. I think the way I look at this is, I'm going to take a step back here. The problem with mental health right now is that we look at mental health problems in two ways. It's either you're having problems, you are anxious and depressed, and they make sense in the context of your life because you have relationship problems or work. Go and see a therapist. Mm-hmm. Now, if you see if someone has problems but they don't make sense, it's like go and take a medication with the family medicine doctor. So we have this very binary one or the other. Now, the issue is there's actually this big group in the middle. So for people who just feel crummy, but it cannot fully be accounted for by issues in their life. Now, this is the gray area where most things are missed. And these are problems like dietary issues, lack of movement, lack of exercise, medical problems that aren't recognized. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because, like, if you just go to a family medicine doctor or a psychiatrist based on your insurance, like that doctor still only has like maybe 5 to 15 minutes to work with you. They're not going to do all of this stuff in the middle that's really important. And so I would say, like, if your stresses seem to be really clearly based in like a relationship issue or like a problem with meaning, go and see like a therapist. That's probably where you're going to get the help.
So a therapist is like when it makes sense.
When it makes sense, yeah. Okay. Because you want to go because it's like you want to go there with a particular problem. I'm having problems in my relationships.
Yep.
I'm going to the therapist. But when it doesn't make sense in the context of your life, don't go and just see a family medicine doctor or a psychiatrist. I like to tell people to see someone that has training in integrative or functional psychiatry, which is essentially a fancy way of saying they're going to look at your diet. They're going to get you moving. They're going to like look at your nutrient levels as well. They're going to help you digest your food. They're going to, they might look at things like Lyme, mold, which are more like kind of on the periphery, but you're going to get a more comprehensive like medical assessment. And if you go to an integrative and functional person, they're going to try all of the non-drug stuff first. If you go conventional route, it's just like your brain's broken, take this drug.
That really clears it up for me. So when the external matches the internal therapy, or a therapist, psychologist, when the external doesn't necessarily match the internal, maybe it's time for a psychiatrist or things like that.
I think so that makes sense. There's one little caveat here, which is that we can often miss like physical problems can turn up in our relationships. And I'll talk about a personal anecdote here is back when I was very unhealthy. I wasn't eating good food. I was drinking like 3 cups of coffee a day, using a lot of nicotine products. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me, but it definitely turned up in my relationship. It turned up with how irritable I was and how short I was with my wife. And if you would have talked to me then, I would have been like, my wife is the problem. I'm fine.
Wow.
And so sometimes if you're like mentally the one who's struggling, you won't recognize that. And so you also want to be a little bit careful about that as well. It's like, I would say also, if things aren't improving with a therapist and, if your wife is like, what is wrong with you? You're crazy. She might be right. And you might be having a hard time seeing that. And so, stopping, for me, it was, I stopped substances. I cleaned up my diet. I got moving again. And then my stress levels came down. And lo and behold, a lot of my relationship problems went away.
When did you finally acknowledge that maybe you are the problem?
Yeah. So it took me a while. What I was noticing, so a lot of this happened. I came out of my residency, and I was just a workaholic. I'd been like that for a long time, just studying, doing exams, all of that stuff, burning the candle on both ends, consuming a lot of caffeine products. And then my daughter was born. This is 6 years ago. And all of a sudden, I had a new job. I was at the FDA. Things were even more stressful. And a couple years after that, like, my body just broke. I mean, I was in my early 30s. I just think I couldn't compensate the same way I used to. And I just started to feel exhausted all the time and irritable. I would get to the end of the day and I would just be, my wife's like, hey, can you read a book to your daughter? And I would be reading this book and I'd be hating every minute of it. I'd just be like, I feel so on edge and uncomfortable and I really don't want to be here. And I'm just like, I just want to sit on the couch and look at, stuff on my phone. And I think for several years up until that point, I was just lying to myself by saying, hey, I'm getting older. I'm, having a kid, you just feel tired. But it was at that point where I was just like, actually, no, this is wrong. So it took me a while to be like, I think this is actually veered to a place where it doesn't make sense that I'm this tired. I'm not that old. Yeah. And that's when I was just like, I think there's something wrong going on. I also had a health scare at the time. I had hepatitis. It came out of nowhere. No one knew what it was. But it was these few things that came up really with just like my physical health and my tiredness that kind of opened the door. And really, it took me several years after that to eventually go back to my wife and be like, actually, you were right. The problem's me.
Yeah, like whatever.
So I got like healthier over several years, and then eventually I was just like, I was actually causing a lot of those problems.
That must have been a really good feeling though, to then like go back to what is supposed to bring you a lot of joy, like spending time with your daughter, and then it didn't bring you joy. That must have like been a double negative of I'm upset already because I'm tired, but now I'm more upset because this thing that is supposed to be like the best feeling in the world is bringing me no joy. But then you transition a couple years later, you go do that same thing, and now it brings you joy again. Like that's got to be a really satisfying feeling.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, obviously, like to feel healthy and present and in the moment, and to look at your kid and just like I teach my daughter how to read now. We like read books
That's
together,
awesome.
and she's like learning how to read, and she's picking up the words, and it's like the greatest feeling ever. But I think about how many. And I know we're both sort of drinking like a coffee. I'm on decaf.
He's on decaf. Don't let him fool you. Yeah. He's stimulant free.
Yeah. But this, I mean, I talk a lot about this, what I think is a bit of an epidemic going on. I think a lot of people, because we are such an ambitious culture in the US, and we are like, and so I'm from Australia, so I can really see the difference in culture like between two countries. And when you're in the US, people have side hustles. They're working really hard. So much of your value and identity here is like, hey, what do you produce? What do you do? Are you doing something meaningful? Like that's different from Australia. And so we burn the candle on both ends. We hit stimulants heavy. I'm very guilty of that. But I also think we have this epidemic of people who are kind of irritable and burnt out and have problems sleeping because we just live in this zone of being like overly stimulated. And the way that turns up is like, it's harder to be present with your spouse. It's harder to be present with your kid. They start saying things like, where are you? And you're just like, I'm just over here, just like vibrating,
Literally. Yeah. You mentioned, I mean, it's such a, we talked about it, about like the individual. And hyper ambitious people thrive in hyper ambitious cultures, but the people that aren't hyper ambitious in this culture that now feel forced to do these things, and they wake up every day and they're like, I don't enjoy this lifestyle. That's got to be even more taxing on them. Like, I think we're trying to match what we are told we're supposed to live like. But if that's just not who you are, it's okay. You're allowed to live a life that's maybe a little more, I don't want to use the word average because that sounds lesser than, a little slower pace, a little less about the next best thing. I mean, my mom says to me all the time, she's like, you don't need to always be looking for more. You can be content with the moment. And I'm like, you're right, but I also feel like you're wrong.
And, I've seen this turn up in the ADHD boom right now. So ADHD, I mean, it's a complicated issue. Like I think there's dietary issues going on. Yeah, I do think there's some folks who are having a harder time concentrating. I know you mentioned that you may have had a head injury that kind of showed up on a brain scan, or
it's
at least
phone. The phone is the reason why I am where I am right now. Yeah, for sure.
But what we've seen is that 23, like when they've done surveys now, 23% of boys aged, I think it was like 15 to 18 now have an ADHD diagnosis.
Wow.
And I know 5% of children in the US are on stimulants. I think that number is even higher. And part of that is, I guess, what we're talking about. it's the fact that everyone's identity has become, how well do I do at school? Where am I going to college? And they've almost become performance enhancing drugs where some kids will use them because they think it gives them an edge, or other kids will use it because they say, well, I'm getting C's and I'm watching my parents heap praise on my siblings who are getting A's and the teachers are like saying this kid is so amazing. Oh, there's something wrong with me because I can't get an A in history or math, even though it's boring. And so they feel like they have to drug themselves to get interested in class.
Yep.
And that's where it's like, I think we do need to intervene and say, listen, school is not for everyone. Like you don't have to be great at English or math. Like, I mean, who uses that much math or history right now? Like, I wouldn't feel like you need to drug yourself to get these really high grades. It doesn't really matter that much. And the most important thing is that you're kind to yourself and that you find something that you're interested in, because a lot of kids out there will eventually have focus and thrive if they are able to get into something where they're just like, this naturally just energizes me.
In like that flow state.
Yeah, and get into this flow state. Because I've talked to people. I talked to a guy, Cooper Davies earlier on this year, who ended up in that situation. He ended up on ADHD meds, going and doing a career in journalism. Eventually, the side effects of the drugs caught up with him, and he came off of them, and he was just like, oh, I hate my job. And so he's like in his 30s now,
Wow.
and he had sort of drugged himself into this career, and he needed to be on stimulants to do it. And then he has a happy ending. He ends up finding something that he loves. He works in the nonprofit space. He's successful there now. But I also, I wonder about people who go into like finance. I mean, like as a psychiatrist, finance people love ADHD meds. Like you talk to energy traders or like people that do like stocks and stuff like that. I'm just like, they love that stuff. Like it's an employment hazard over there.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And cocaine in the 90s and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But now it's just stimulants. And so I also wonder, like, because I bet you we have kids who are just like, hey, you just have to go into finance. And so you get on stimulants to do that, and then you get into that job. And that's not really what brings the kid to life.
But you talk about, again, like it becomes your personality. Oh, you're in finance, you're high energy, you're fast paced, you never stop. So you may have to take this drug to match up to what everybody else is doing. And now you're stuck. Like you mentioned, your buddy is, you don't even know if you enjoy this thing, but you're so high on these medications that you're tricking yourself into thinking you are. It's like going to the bar, getting hammered and being like, I love the bar. Do you go to the bar sober? See how much you like the bar.
Yeah.
Do you like that girl, or are you just hammered?
Yeah.
You're like, there's all these things that we never take a step back and acknowledge. What do we want as individuals? Because we're forcing ourselves into these holes. You know, it's a crazy circumstance when you kind of take a step back from it. But you mentioned chemical imbalances kind of being a myth. There's always this like, dopamine is like the big keyword nowadays with the phones. It's like a dopamine hit and a rush, and you need a dopamine detox. Is draining your system and you have no motivation or excitement for life. Is there a correlation between people with ADHD and not having the same dopamine levels as somebody else?
No, absolutely not. No.
I was lied to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, there's no, like, I mean, this is why we don't do any like brain scans or blood tests. Now, this is very different from saying that you and other people listening right now who have struggled from brain fog and motivation in the past or inattention, like that's real. Just because we can't find like, oh, it's like a dopamine issue, doesn't mean that can't be very disabling. It can't be very frustrating and challenging, like all of that. But it may not be a dopamine problem. It could be an inflammation problem. It could be the fact that you're on social media all the time. It could be the fact that you're not moving your body. You know, you're eating bad food. Yeah. You could have a medical problem as well. And so again, it's this whole way of like when you just like, hey, you know, Johnny, you have a dopamine problem. You know, look at the brain scan, take the drug. Like you might not end up keeping that curiosity. And so it could be physical things. Like it could be like physical things going on like with diet, but it could also just be like, is this really where I'm meant to be? Is this really what I'm meant to be doing? Mm-hmm. Like, does this bring me to life? And so these, like all of the symptoms from psychiatric conditions, like unless we're talking about like, you know, schizophrenia or end stage dementia or something, like they mean something. Like, and we should lean into them and be curious and only resort to the drugs after we've really kind of gone through all of the non-drug interventions and try to fix them in that way.
Right. Because I wanted to get to what I would consider like extreme cases, like you said, schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder and dementia. But before that, I think we deal with such a issue with the phones that nobody really acknowledged 5 years ago because we didn't realize it was that big of a deal. But if you ask the average person now how often do they doom scroll, it's like very frequently, right? And so this feeling, and maybe we don't bring it to the chemical place yet, but this feeling of sucking yourself dry of any sort of excitement for life, that is real, correct? Like there is something going on chemically inside of my brain that if I spend 5 hours on my phone doom scrolling social media, there's no way I'm as excited to go do things that I'm typically excited to do.
Yeah. So I mean, the social media thing is interesting. I think like this is not like if I pull up Instagram and I just start going, that's not rest. And so the first thing is I think a lot of people, maybe more our age, I think we pull out our phones to like relax. It's like I've been working really hard. I'm just gonna like look at some memes on Instagram, send them to my buddies, have a laugh. This is stimulating for you. So I feel oftentimes we pull out our phones because we're exhausted. And it just ends up being a thing we scroll on, but it doesn't really rejuvenate our minds. It kind of burns us out. It's too stimulating. And so one of the big things is that all of the time we spend on our phones used to go to other things. And this is the most scary in children right now. So like teens, they spend on average 3.5 hours on social media a day. So what does that mean? So not only is that kind of stimulating, it's not relaxing. And it may feel relaxing, but on a physiological level, it's not relaxing to your brain.
It's more stimulating than real life.
Yeah.
So your break is actually harder than your non-break.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like, going out for a walk or chatting with, a bro that you have a laugh with, and that's kind of like relaxing. And so instead of 3.5 hours of like, goofing off with your friends down at the park, riding your bike outside, sleeping, now you're just like, if you're a girl, you're like posting pictures of yourself online, or, you're seeing photos from a party that you weren't invited to. And it's just like, oh God, that's hurting. Or if you're a guy, maybe you're watching someone streaming or playing video games. Like it also erodes into these healthy things that we used to do, because you've taken that 3.5 hours from somewhere else in your life.
Yeah.
And so that's a big problem with the phone. And think about how that compounds. I mean, we look at like guys these days, and I wonder if you guys see this now, but in my generation, we weren't afraid to talk to girls. Like it was like we would go out to a bar and we would, this is fun. Yeah.
There's a couple things I have to say about this one. Keep going.
Yeah,
I'm afraid of women.
Yeah, like I remember we would go out to a bar and we'd all be egging each other on, and we'd be like, hey, go talk to that chick, and she'd be with like a couple of her girlfriends, and we'd walk over there and we'd shoot our shot, and sometimes they would all just be like and like turn away, and then everyone was cracking up, they'd be laughing at you, right. And it was scary, but it was something that we did. And I mean, we would meet girls at bars that we would go to, and we would talk to them, and it felt like more, I wouldn't say, it's just so easy all the time. It's anxiety provoking, it can be scary, but we did that. And now I see that people, like, they don't approach each other anymore. It's all online. You wouldn't talk to someone at the bus stop. You wouldn't talk to someone you're on public transportation with. You wouldn't talk to someone who was like walking into the library as you were leaving at like on a college campus. It's just, and so I also think that the phones, they get in the way of you just having, like, because you're not, well, two things. One, you don't have enough time socially interacting, but without the phone, we used to just get bored and we would do stupid stuff. The word is bored, right? Like you got bored, you said, you know what, let me go, you're at a bar, you're bored, I'm going to talk to a girl. We're at a bar, we're bored, we go on our phone. And I think there's a couple things that are reasons why people aren't approaching, or men aren't approaching women, which is so weird because, like you just mentioned, everyone at that bar
is there to interact with other humans. If you didn't want to interact, you'd be home. And I'm not saying every girl there wants to get flirted with, but you're there to talk to other people. So why are we going in there and assuming, oh, she doesn't want me to talk to her? She may want you to talk to her, even if it's something as casual as, hey, what are you drinking, or whatever that may be. So you have two things I think happening is, like we mentioned, like the Me Too movement. The last thing I would want is to whisper something in a girl's ear. She takes it the wrong way, and now I'm Me Too and I'm plastered over social media.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is that, like you mentioned, it's kind of like the cold plunge analogy versus just taking a drug. The drug would be going on the phone, the talking to the girl would be going into the cold plunge. We don't realize that there is a reward on the other side of this scary tunnel of going to talk to the girl. Even if she denies you, getting denied is more embarrassing in your head than actuality. If a girl says, hey, I'm not interested, you kind of walk away, you laugh with your buddies. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But the answer is already no if you don't ask. But now if this girl is actually engaging you, you have so much more self-confidence. And we talk about it, how men are just not confident anymore because there's nothing to validate your confidence. Why would you feel confident in talking to girls if you've never done it before? The reward mechanism of the phone is it's so much easier to like a girl's story or DM her because the risk isn't there. But I do think you need risk to receive some sort of reward.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is, like, I think there's a lot of people out there who are just like, oh, I'm never going to approach a girl if she's with a friend because that's like rude or something like that. Or
it's your excuse.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, until you go out and, you know, you've walked up to a bunch of girls and they're in a group, or she's with a friend and you've been like, hey, excuse me, I noticed you could say something cool. I noticed you from across the bar. I wanted to meet you. Like, sometimes it's going to blow up in your face and they're like, hey, sorry, we're just here together. We're just catching up now. But sometimes, she's just, she will engage with you, and then forever, for the rest of your life, you're like, that was some bullshit excuse that I told myself. Like,
you need to get over it one time.
Yeah, and you're just like, so the girl of my dreams, she could be over there in a group of four girls, and I mean, you can go over there and don't be retarded about it, but just try.
Yeah, don't be an idiot. Yeah.
But I think so many people, they just get stuck in this place where it's just like, oh my God, the world will end if I get rejected. And if I think about me and my friends, I mean, we've probably been rejected by over 1,000 girls. Like, it's just like,
it's part of the game.
Yeah, it was part of it. And now I have a lovely wife and I'm a growing family and stuff like that. Yeah. But I just feel like we had much more of a capacity to put ourselves out there and be embarrassed, and this has kind of shut that down.
I wonder if, and I'm sure there's not like research to back this, but if my generation and even the ones to follow are just overthinking everything. And so what's her name? Mel Robbins talks about like the 5-second rule, or just go. So when you're up in the morning, the more time you have to overthink and create excuses as to why you should stay in bed is the more likely you are going to be to stay in bed, right? So if you automatically don't give yourself any time to make any excuse to just get up and go, you're going to start your day.
Yeah.
So same thing with a girl. You walk into the bar, you see a girl you like, if you automatically go to her, you're more likely to go and talk to her versus, maybe that's her boyfriend right there, and oh, that's her friend, and I have to go to the bathroom now, and you've let 5 minutes, 10 minutes go, you're never going to approach that girl. Yeah. So it seems to be like the time that you take to overthink is stopping you from going to do what you actually want to do. And I'm just curious to hear like your thoughts if you think we're just a generation of overthinkers.
Yes. Yeah. I think, again, I think boredom is a big driver of action. And so I think we overthink things. I definitely Me Too didn't help. A lot of people say that when I'm just like, hey, why aren't you guys meeting anyone? I have younger friends. I'm just like, what's the dating scene like? And they're just like online. I'm just like, well, why don't you meet this person here? And they're just like, well, me too. But I think, I don't know if you guys like, the younger generation, because I mean, we're 5 years apart. I think you're 30, right?
30, yeah.
You're 30, I'm 35. And so it's like, oh my God, this generational divide.
It's crazy though. Like even 5 years, things have drastically changed.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's so comfortable to be at home on Netflix or to just be on our phones now. It's just like you just fucking bored, and you're just like, what am I going to do tonight? There's nothing good on TV. There's no funny memes. Mm-hmm. There's like I guess let me just grab my buddy and we'll go down to the pub. I just felt like the boredom pushed you into social environments more. Like, I don't know. Have you ever, like, for me, I like EDM and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I always get these like raves in the 90s like clips, and it's just like people chewing their face off. But there's like no phones everywhere. And the comments are just like, oh my God, it was so great before we had phones. And you just like see people standing around like kind of chatting.
So it's because I hear that. People are always saying I was born in the wrong generation. Do you think there's truth to that, as in this is a very hard generation to grow up in? Or do you think it's more nostalgic tendencies where we romanticize our past and we always think that the past is better than the present?
I would say, I mean, I have a take on this, and like, yeah, for sure. Like, I think convenience has gone up in this generation, but I do think, I think this generation is harder because there's more things like the phones and social media that just fill you with bullshit values. Like, I mean, like I have some younger friends right now who are sort of struggling to launch their lives, and they're just like overthinking. They're like, one of my friends is like, oh, I can't get. I find going to job interviews, it's so degrading. This entry level job, it's so like, ugh.
Yeah.
And I think in his mind, he's like, unless I have an Instagram worthy job where it's just like I'm changing the world, or it's highly paid, or it's something really cool, it's like I'm a loser now. Like, and I never dealt with any of that. Like when I finished in 2008, it was like you go to college and you try and get a good job because you might need to support a family. Like I wasn't thinking about posting it online and how people were going to look at me and perceive me and things like that. I wasn't thinking about how my vacation reflected upon me and like all of this. Like, again, so I also get a lot of these nostalgia reels of like high school back in the 2000s, and you see what the people are wearing and what the girls look like. Everyone's like dressed down. It's like our lives aren't plastered all over the internet. So I do think there's this like performance culture right now that young people feel, and I think that like totally just stresses them out, and it makes people like overthink it more.
Do you see a correlation between boredom and depression?
I don't know about boredom. I'd say more things like, I think social isolation. Like, boredom goes with social isolation a lot, but yeah, I think social isolation is like a big one.
Would you say that is the number one correlator to depression?
Yeah, that's a really strong one.
Why do you think?
Because we are social animals. I mean, that's like when you are with someone like, a friend or a partner who you truly feel safe with, like you just, like they've done studies on your HRV, which is like your parasympathetic tone, the nervous system in your body that makes you feel calm. When you're around people and you're in community, you're less stressed. You feel safer. We interpret isolation as like a threat. And so being by yourself all the time and disconnected, our brain does not like that at all.
I mean, you look at what's happened with work from home, but it's weird because we crave the opposite of what we need. Everybody wants to work from home nowadays, which is the weirdest thing in the world.
Yeah, not me though.
But people now are they get what they wanted, and now they're sitting at home, and it seems to be a driving force to depression. You know, why do we then think that's what we want?
I think the grass is always greener on the other side, and then we think like, oh, I'm going to be able to sleep in, I'm not going to commute, I'm going to be able to work out, but then eventually you're at home and you're just sitting in this box the whole day, and like no one's around, and you're just like, what is this? This is
horrible.
This sucks. And I mean, this is why you see a lot of women go back to work. I think a lot of people are like, oh, my wife's going to have a kid, and if you're lucky enough that you make enough that your wife can stay home, most of them will have that question of, do I go back to work? Because it's so isolating at home. It's just like, my companion is now this toddler who I talk to. Like, I will now go through all of the inconvenience of commuting and arguing with my husband when my kid is sick, like about who's going to stay home. Yeah. She will go through all of that because she wants to be connected to people, and she wants to be engaged in something meaningful. So, yeah, I think relationships and being connected to other people, it's one of the most important things for your mental health.
Yeah, I always wonder why we're not. It's interesting how our brains seem to do a really good job tricking us into thinking we like what we don't need. You know, like again, we trick ourselves into thinking that we are better off sleeping in, or we're better off alone, or we're better off making every excuse in the world to not work hard. But those tend to result in a more content and satisfied life. If you ask majority of people that feel content, it seems like they have a lot of purpose and they do a lot of things. Like they're not giving themselves time to overthink if they even feel depressed. You might not even know these certain feelings unless you sit back and say, am I depressed? What does that feel like? What does that mean? Oh, you know what? I had this spurt of anxiety. Maybe I am depressed. And now you're self-loathing, it seems, you know? And it's a weird balance, I would have to assume, like with therapy and going to doctors, is how much do you talk about your issues versus just going and, I don't want to say ignoring, but focusing on what brings you joy versus the opposite.
Yeah. I think, you have to listen to yourself. And to the extent that a therapist can help you get in touch with yourself, I think that's good. I mean, the whole issue of wanting to work from home, I think you want to also think about, like, do I really want to work from home, or do I want to get away from my colleagues because maybe I don't really like the work that I'm doing and I'm not connected to the mission, and so just being here just feels like a waste of time.
Right.
Because that's not like a work from home fix. That's a like, I want to feel like I'm doing something I care about. Like, and so, you know, get away from the drugs and the masking and the distractions and, you know, whatever it is you use to soothe yourself, whether it's pornography or watching video games or playing video games. There's all of these different ways that we try and like shut down our awareness of powerful things. But if you like lean into them, you might be like, actually, I don't want to work from home. I think probably the coolest thing in the world is if I'm actually doing something that I love and I'm surrounded by people who love the same thing, and then we'll be really connected and we'll have a lot in common because we all care about the same mission. And how do I get my life in that direction where I'm, you know, physically around people that, you know, lift me up and I enjoy, and that's where I need to go to. And the thing with mental health is this stuff is really hard. I mean, it's so nice to be able to just take this pill and this job that's like boring. Now you'll feel like really like zoned in and locked in, and, you know, this kind of like this sort of high you get from the pill. And you're just like, okay, this is fine. Like, that's like so much easier than being like, shit, I need to turn around. I need to turn this vehicle around and start heading in another direction.
Right.
And so, you know, like all of this stuff takes years. I mean, you could spend a couple decades like finding the woman of your dreams and the work that you like, and but you just need to give it time.
Yeah, I think that's probably the reason why people they opt out or they opt into the drugs, because that's an instant fix versus what could take a very, very long time. If in America, I mean, that's the only study that I understand, our suicide rates are up.
Yeah.
Our medication rate is up. Is it safe to say that these SSRIs just don't work, or is there more to this?
On a population level, I think they're making people worse. And so that, the way SSRIs work is really in the short term. I mean, we have to have a very sober look at what they do. These are drugs that help with anxiety and constrict your emotional range. And so, yeah, if someone's super anxious, you could put them on that, and that may calm them down. But long term, there is no evidence that these drugs work. They've never been studied any longer than a year. And there's quite a lot of obvious things that could actually make people worse in the long run. So the first thing is tolerance. They wear off over time. And so you're just on this drug and it's not doing anything. But the other thing is just the very and this should be concerning for most people. It's like I don't think our brains are designed to be in a drugged state for years or decades. I mean, that is going to just exert a toll. And so I see a lot of people gradually get worse on SSRIs. They become more fatigued. They start to develop brain fog over time. And so I think long term, and now we have like 15% of our population on antidepressants. It's like 20% of women. 20% of women.
That is insane.
Are on antidepressants. Yeah. That's crazy. And if you go to women over 60, it's 1 in 3. And so we are totally we're on shitloads of drugs.
I don't mean to cut you off. If it seems like women are more depressed overall, if they're the ones taking more of the drugs, why are men more likely to commit suicide?
It's an impulsivity thing. Men, like when a man is sad and suicidal, it's much easier for him to act on it. Just by, I think, our nature. I think we throw ourselves into things a lot more. There's also higher access to firearms. Women, they will talk about being suicidal a lot, but they're less likely to carry through with it.
Do you think them talking about it is helping them through it, though? Like, do you think the simple fix is just everybody always says, well, men have to talk about it more. Men have to talk about their feelings. Or is it just make it talk about it as much as they want? It's not really going to help them.
No way. That's not the solution. I mean, the solution for suicide is to fix the reason why people are unhappy.
Right. Not just saying I'm unhappy.
Yeah. I mean, what is saying unhappy going to do if, I don't know, you're going through a divorce and you can't see your kids, or you even on a bigger macro stage that, housing is unaffordable and now you can't make ends meet and you're poor. I mean, just talking about it isn't going to fix those issues.
Right.
Or if you have a shit diet and your gut's inflamed and you just feel crummy all the time.
Yeah.
Like, we need to get to the root causes. So
I remember I watched this video online, and this like really skewed or changed my perspective on medication. So I've always been very anti-drugs, right? I've always thought, and I guess because biasedly, like, I never needed them. So I'm like, why would you ever think you needed a drug to cure your depression? You're fine. Go outside, go for a walk, kind of like naively. And I remember watching this video of like somebody, they were hiking and it was beautiful outside, and this lady looked super happy, and one of the guys interviewed her and said, oh, like, what is your key to happiness? And she was very blunt. She goes, medication. She's like, I would not be where I am today without medication. And he's like, all right, bye. See you later. Mm-hmm. So I saw that and I completely switched. I'm like, maybe there is a need for medication for certain people, but maybe it's not long term. Maybe it's this springboard out of the hole that you're in, because if she wasn't on medication, she wouldn't be able to do the thing that's actually helping cure her depression, which is going outside, enjoying nature, enjoying her time with other people. Is that how you view medication now, as like this springboard into doing the things that you could not bring yourself to doing without?
I think it could be helpful in that way. Like, let's say you're paralyzed by depression or anxiety and you take a drug that mutes it, and now all of a sudden you're moving your body and interacting with other people. Mm-hmm. This definitely, and that's definitely like a good effect.
Right.
But truly the way the drugs should be used is you need to go through, I think they make people worse in the long run. And so before you get yourself into a situation where you're like, I am going to take the risk of being on this long term, knowing that, yes, for some people, like, it's never going to cause a problem and they could stay in it for life, but also knowing that for other people, it will make them worse, and there's no way of predicting which camp I'm going to be in. Before you land there, you need to say, okay, are there issues in my life with, like, my relationship, my work, my purpose? Okay, I'm going to address those things first. If it's coming out of nowhere, you need to start looking at your diet, your exercise, mind-body practices, things like breathing, all of, do a comprehensive medical assessment to look for, like, hormonal issues and address those. If you've gone through all of those addressable things and you're still suffering, I think you can be on medications at that point. I think that is the time to use the medications, because there's no point suffering needlessly.
Sure.
But the issue is that no one does any of these things because it doesn't work with our healthcare economics, because we just have to see people so quickly.
Right. So taking these medications with a plan to wean off them once you're able to do, like we said, the things that are going to actually cure or help you, like fixing relationships or going outside. Are there any circumstances, so we talked about extremes like schizophrenia and dementia and multiple personality disorder, are those instances where you do believe that people should be medicated?
So it's a case-by-case basis, but I do believe that things like schizophrenia, they really can be biological. I mean, I've seen, like, there's no way of explaining it in the context of the person's stresses. Their diet isn't that unusual medically. Right. They seem fine, and they're having, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, all of that. that's a more complicated issue because these antipsychotic medications, they can cause permanent movement disorders. They shrink the brain in some areas as well.
Wow.
And then also people gain a lot of weight, so it ends up shortening their lifespan, like if you stay on them long term. And so you're in a situation where you have to say, do I want to try and manage occasional bouts of psychosis off medications? Now that's hard because you need family members to take time out of their lives to keep you safe, and obviously a lot of people don't have that. Or do I want to rely on medications and then I just take that risk and deal with the side effects? That's super individual. You have to see how bad the person's symptoms are and what supports they have. But I do think there's a lot of people out there with severe schizophrenia, sometimes severe bipolar disorder, where you really need to rely on medications, even if you'd like to not. It's just not practical.
Okay, and that's how you would approach a conversation with a patient like that.
Correct. Yeah.
You would say, unfortunately, this is something that.
Yeah.
Now, would you express like, hey, this is something you could potentially wean off of, or are there cases where this individual should be on medication forever?
So there's three things that like if someone comes to me and they have a psychotic break, or maybe they had multiple psychotic breaks, there's three things that I've seen get people to a point where they don't need medications. The first is the ketogenic diet. For whatever reason, that is really effective and that can lead to a full remission in symptoms. The second one is gluten-free. Some people are really sensitive to gluten, and this is not just a dietary fad. This has been proven and replicated at the University of Maryland in their celiac disease center. They've brought in inpatients with schizophrenia and put them on gluten-free diets, and they find lower rates of psychosis.
Wow.
They replicated that twice. And so for a small fraction of people with psychosis, they're sensitive to gluten, and so that can help. So keto, gluten, and then the third thing is sobriety. And that would be particularly sobriety from cannabis. And so when I've seen people do those things together, they've been able to some of them have been able to come off medications.
Now, okay, and now this is actual schizophrenia versus, and we'll talk about it, what you've considered this like weed-induced psychosis, correct? Like this is pure, this individual has been diagnosed.
A lot of that is weed-induced psychosis that's been misdiagnosed as schizophrenia, because a lot of people who use cannabis products will end up looking manic or psychosis when they actually just have had a drug injury to cannabis.
How do you know the difference between the two? One person that actually has schizophrenia versus somebody that is displaying traits or symptoms of because of the weed? Yeah,
there's no blood test or anything like that, so it's usually clinical. And typically we look at a tight temporal relationship. So let's say, for instance, you have like a normal kid who's in college, they're doing well, but now they're staying at like a frat, and the guys in the frat, they smoke. And, he was fine for the first 2 years, and then he started smoking, and then within a couple of months, he develops a psychotic episode, and it's a bad one. And, they end up in the hospital, and he gets kind of drugged up on like a whole bunch of antipsychotics, and then for a couple of months afterwards, he's still having psychosis. A lot of psychiatrists will look at that patient and just say, well, this couldn't be, a bad trip on cannabis, because a bad trip on cannabis, like you get paranoid for a couple days and then you're fine. Mm-hmm. The fact that this guy's still having problems a few months later, that means that he has schizophrenia. I don't believe that because I think that because I've seen this in my practice, and I've also heard from many people who have suffered from this, is that you can have one of these drug-induced psychoses and then completely recover, but it can take you like a year or two afterwards. And so I think that some people, like especially if they have this history where they just start smoking cannabis and very shortly afterwards they have their first psychotic episode,
right,
and it's really tight, I think some kids have just a genetic susceptibility that they can have a neurotoxic reaction to it that can take several years. That can take a year or maybe 2 years to fully recover. Yeah.
And you mentioned before, it was almost like a concussion-esque, like you banged your head so hard and it takes that much, like any one of these breaks is almost like an actual brain trauma, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're like, like so many people can tolerate cannabis. Like you could have like 10 people in a room, everyone's like smoking a bong or a joint, and 9 out of 10 people are laughing and having a good time, and you can have one person who starts to become paranoid. That's like already the first sign that this is not the right drug for you. This is because you're not having the expected response to it.
Sure.
And so, the other issue is the potency of cannabis it's like 7 times higher than it used to be 30 years ago. Most people aren't aware of this. They think it's safer because it's become legalized. But the cannabis you actually get, like in the early 90s, it's like less than 5%.
Sure.
Some of it's still around 3%. But right now, most of what people get in the dispensary in the US is like 25 to 35%. It's super hybridized. They've bred strains together to make it stronger. It's hydroponic. It's grown in enriched like mediums. And so they get these really strong buds. And so, the strength of the cannabis it's much more potent now. And so I was saying, you could, if you are sensitive to it, and you have this psychotic reaction, if you continue to smoke afterwards, that's almost like a second hit. So you can have that really bad first hit, which is already like almost like concussive, because think about it, like you smoked a substance and it led to a psychotic episode that had enduring symptoms for like 2 to 3 months. I mean, that's not like the drug is out of your system like within and cannabis hangs around for a while, but it could be like most of it's gone within a month. If you're still having symptoms of psychosis a couple weeks later when that level has really dropped down, like we're not really dealing with a drug effect on the brain. Like you've had like something that's kind of hit your nervous system, and now you're like recovering. And so when we see like psychotic reaction and then this gradual taper that happens over like a year sometimes, where the parents are just like, hey, he was really bad at the start, then he had some paranoia, he was like moody, irritable. Sure. But now it's mostly gone away. Like every now and then he's still a little out of it. Like that's not schizophrenia. That's what a brain looks like after it's had a severe neurotoxic reaction and it's recovering over time. And so the issue is, as a society, we tend to downplay the harms of cannabis because it's become legalized now.
Right. It's just a plant.
It's just a plant, or it's a medicine, right?
Right.
And so even if you've had one of these reactions in the past, many people are just like, hey, no big deal. And then they'll smoke again, and they'll have like another flare up, and you really just have to completely eliminate it, and then support the person's physical health and just let their brain gradually recover.
So you're saying that the 3 things you mentioned before, those are the keys to helping somebody recover from some of these psychotic breaks.
Well, so someone who's like, if you just had a psychotic break from cannabis, like you may not need to do a ketogenic diet. I mean, you could try it. You may not need to do gluten. Like the main, like the ketogenic diet, this one is really for people who especially have like insulin resistance. Like, so if they're having dietary issues, they're eating a lot of carbohydrates, sugar's out of control. Keto is great because with insulin resistance, you actually end up starving tissues in your brain. Like as the neurons become less sensitive to it, you can't bring glucose in, and so that leads to symptoms. With the gluten-free diet, this is for people who have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. You can't pick that up on any test, and so if you remove that subset will improve. With the cannabis, it's like you just stop smoking cannabis, move your body, eat a relatively healthy diet. Like you don't have to do those other things. Got it.
That's the priority, is just stopping smoking.
Yeah.
What is the correlation like between that and sleep? Because it seems like people that have these breaks have a very hard time sleeping, or they're sleeping too much.
Yeah, so what I generally see is difficulty sleeping, and I mean if you have a nervous system injury, a lot of these people, they feel very uncomfortable and anxious and keyed up, and that will carry over into the evening. You'll have a harder time getting to sleep and staying asleep. And unfortunately, that fallout from the injury that makes people more anxious, a lot of these patients, they will end up turning to cannabis again, because many people started smoking cannabis for difficulty sleeping and for anxiety.
Sure.
And so now you've had a hit to the brain and you feel like kind of more anxious. And you're going to reach out to the thing that you used to do. And so I see some people get stuck in this cycle where they're just constantly, feeling worse and worse and worse, and they cannot get rid of the weed because that's how they manage all of those uncomfortable feelings.
It's like this double-edged sword of what you thought was helping you and it's actually hurting you.
Yeah.
Individuals like this, because we mentioned before, is like what you used to smoke 10, 15 years ago is nothing compared to what you're smoking today. Are these individuals solely having these breaks because of the concentration of THC? Like, would they be able to handle a much lower dose, or they should stay away from it altogether?
Yeah, so it's hard to know, and I don't know if I would test it. I mean, the safer thing to say is, like, if you have had like a very bad response to cannabis, like, I mean, it's a sign that your brain does not respond.
It's just
well
not
to
working with you. Yeah.
It doesn't respond well to it. I mean, and like maybe like, I mean, there's a big difference. Like, let's say, for instance, it happened on dabs or shatter or even delta 8, like some of these like synthetics that really hit the receptor hard. Dabs and shatter, they can be up to like 90% THC
So
concentrate. Crazy. Like, you could have a psychotic reaction there, but like if you smoked like 20%, like maybe that's fine for you because that's like such a big difference. I mean, I wouldn't risk it, but yeah, there's this huge variety in just how potent it is. And most, like, there was a study that was done recently in it was in the UK, and they were comparing I think it was 5% hash and 15% THC skunk, and they were looking at the background rate of first break psychosis in the groups. Now, the background rate in the population for a psychotic episode is about 1 in 100, so 1%. When they looked at the group that was smoking 5%, there was actually no difference. They found no difference. But when they looked at the group smoking 15%, it was 5%. And so there was a 5-fold increase. Now, that the interesting thing about that is 15% is like kind of like mid-range now. Like in American dispensaries, it's like 30 to 35. And so if we had like a 5-fold increase with that 15% daily use strain, like, I mean, it might even be like 10%. Like if you're smoking 30% THC or something stronger, there might be like it could be even higher than that. So the strength is definitely correlated with the risk of psychosis. And the other thing that I just want to mention is many people think cannabis is like pretty safe from a psychiatric perspective, but researchers have gone and they've looked at all of the drug-induced psychoses that have come to emergency rooms, and then they've followed them like out of all the people that were smoking cocaine, crack, heroin, opiates, and who had psychotic episodes, what proportion of them went on to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is by definition repeated psychotic episodes that last longer than 6 months. Cannabis was higher than all of them. It was higher than LSD. It was higher than methamphetamine. It was higher than cocaine. There's something specifically about cannabis that is more risky, particularly for these neurotoxic reactions that end up looking like schizophrenia and bipolar.
Why do you think, like chemically? You don't know.
I have no idea. It's we just see it in the data.
Right, because like that was always the fear as a kid. You're like, oh, you're gonna stay away from LSD and acid because one bad trip and you're screwed for the rest of your life, type of thing. Like I know a buddy that took way too many drops and he cracks his back one time and he's back into a trip. But nobody ever talks about the potential harms of something like THC, I guess because it's so new, nobody knows about it. Do you think there's going to be restrictions put on the level of THC that is sold in these dispensaries? I mean, you look at a liquor store, first of all, there's an age limit, but there's also, and I know there's an age limit for cannabis too, but you can't sell moonshine. You know what I mean? You can't sell this stuff as if it's fine. The comparison I was telling Joe before is like, it'd be as if we progressively had a beer that tasted like a beer, but with the same ABV as vodka. And so you're sipping on this beer thinking you're okay, and you have 2 beers and you're blacked out. Yeah. But you look back, like, I used to be able to drink beers all the time. What happened to me? I must have to fight through this and I'll be okay one day. I think that's probably a bigger issue than people aren't aware of is that it becomes this mental game of all my friends can smoke, but I can't. You know what? If I just keep smoking more and more, one day I'll be able to have the fun highs like they do.
Yeah. Yeah. So some places do that. So I'm from Utah, and I know Utah has a limit to the strength you can get, and in Utah it's only medical. Like, I mean, it's by name only. It's super easy to get a medical card, but it's all done through the medical dispensary. Right. And there's a limit on how much you can have per month. But that's really different from, like, say, California. And is it medical in New Jersey, or is it recreational?
It's legal? Recreational here.
It was medical first, and then now they have...
and they have them everywhere nowadays.
Oh, now it's like, before it was four different companies were able to open a dispensary.
Yeah.
Now it's free reign.
Yeah, everyone. Everywhere you go, you can walk in. And I think the difference, too, is, like, they correlate it with fun things like gummies and drinks, and you're supposed to have this good time doing it, and they don't ever really warn you about the fears.
Yeah, I don't
the
think,
risks.
I mean, I don't know if you guys have gone into a dispensary anytime. It's been anytime recently. It's been a long time since I went in California. Like, I don't remember seeing, like, hey, this is like this % THC. Like, it didn't back then. It didn't seem like it was listed.
Is it now?
Well, now they have it listed, and that's what people are looking for.
Right, they think it's
like, I want the 30%, and I'm like, you're out of your mind.
Give me the dirt. That's where I just question, I guess, why, and maybe it's because it's more like you talk about, like, the skunk weed or the mid weed that we're used to getting high off of, because you take a couple hits and you just feel relaxed, or maybe you're more giggly. That's what I would assume most people are looking for, but yet these stores are selling this stuff that's rocket fuel. Like, why are they even doing it?
I can only imagine it's that, higher is better, and people feel like they're getting more bang for their buck.
They're chasing the more, kind of like how we talked about the medication. If I felt good on 5 milligrams, I want to feel great on 10.
Yeah, and guys are stupid sometimes. Like, I mean, I remember, like, we had a guy who could, like, smoke, like, the biggest cones, like, out of the bong, and we all wanted to be able to smoke big cones as well. So maybe some guys, like,
it's a macho thing.
It's like a macho thing as well. So we can also be really dumb in that way. And also we're like, okay, 30%, 3 out of 3 out of 10, that doesn't seem that high, but forgetting that, like, hey, 20 years ago, like, 5% was, like, where it was at, and now, like, this stuff is insanely strong.
How often are you seeing in your practice people coming to you with some sort of weed-induced psychosis?
It's the biggest thing that I see for psychotic type conditions.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I'm doing, like, an antipsychotic taper, I get a lot of guys in their 30s who, they've sort of they've wised to it. They've realized, hey, this is really not helping me, and they're on antipsychotic medication at high dose. And so when I go into their history, it's most of them it's drug induced and it's cannabis induced.
How often are they resistant to accepting that there's a correlation between the two? Like, they're like, no, I smoke weed, but that's not the problem.
Well, never in my practice, because people specifically come to me to come off medications.
Got it. Okay.
And generally, like, I'm really outspoken about this. This is one of my most controversial things. Like, there's so many people feel strongly about cannabis that people will see what I have to say about it, and they'll be like, oh, shit, yeah, I remember, like, or a parent will see it, and they're like, yeah, John was, like, he went to this frat, and he started smoking, and then, like, he had this thing, and we've been to, like, all these doctors, and they just nuked him on drugs, and, like, he was fine before that.
Right.
And it was like they'll start putting it together, and they'll be like, no, this doesn't have to be his story. And particularly, like, I feel like people who have schizophrenia, and this isn't research, this is just me talking from 10 years of doing this. Like, the real, like, schizophrenia, I feel like they continuously look, like, pretty sick. Like, they continuously have delusions and psychosis. They feel quite cognitively impaired as well. Like, not a little bit, but, like, substantially. The guys who have drug-induced psychosis from cannabis, they still seem pretty normal at times. Like, they've had a problem, but you start talking to them, and, they smile, their face is reactive, they can joke around with you sometimes. They still have problems concentrating, but they look pretty darn normal, like, when they're not in an acute episode. And so when I see things like that, I'm like, this seems like more of, like, a neurological injury from from a drug because you seem mostly fine in between. But when it's bizarre delusions, consistent, like all of that stuff, I'm just like this. That feels different to me. That's more of a like there's something in your brain.
So when you're seeing this individual as in like almost two separate buckets at times, like one conversation makes no sense, and then you talk to him the next day or 2 days after, and you're like, that sounds like you made sense today. Like, why is this happening? And I would assume the issue is that maybe doctors aren't making the correlation that you are, that this was caused by something that I have to address to this patient, or else he's never going to know. You may walk away like, oh no, you're fine. Just, kind of walk it off, and you don't need the drugs right now. You're not going to be diagnosed with anything. Go back home and you'll be okay. And that person never even knew that the weed was causing this issue.
Yeah. And oftentimes it's minimized. Like I know lots of people who who will, I had a psychotic episode and I have schizophrenia or bipolar, but I'm going to keep on smoking weed because it's more and more legal now, so this can't be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really just need to do is take my antipsychotics, and they're potentially just continuing to hurt themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody that has this sort of weed-induced psychosis, you don't recommend any sort of antipsychotics?
No, I do sometimes because the main thing is like stop the weed and get healthy and just give yourself time. But the reality is even when you're helping these folks, they may still have episodes of paranoia or delusions, and depending on their family support, you may be able to manage that, or you may need to use some antipsychotics at times to just get them through difficult patches. Like if things are flaring up, they might go on it for a month or two and then just bring them back down again. But these are some of the hardest cases really, because when their brain is healing, they will still throw up like episodes of paranoia and disinhibition. And then, these are serious. Like people wander out of their homes and families wake up and they're like, oh shit, where have they gone? Or sometimes they're violent, or sometimes they can be really irritable. And so you use the antipsychotics just for what they are. They are a tool to sedate and bring someone's behavior under control. And so if there is like a little flare up while they're coming off, then I think it's reasonable to use it.
Right, but I guess the issue is they don't want to use it. If they're in the last thing a person that's in a flare-up is going to say is like, give me my meds.
No, exactly, yeah.
They're going to say the meds caused this.
And then, they end up in the hospital until they kind of cool off, and then they come home, and it could be messy, yeah.
But you're saying, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is just to stop the weed and get back to living a healthier lifestyle. And maybe it's an understanding, again, you're the doctor, explaining this to the patient, like, look, you are going to get better, but there are going to be moments of paranoia, anxiety, and that's normal. Like, don't think that you're not healing just because you had one bad day. I think everybody has a bad day, right? Even a healthy human has days where you're just on edge the entire time, or you're a little bit more upset and anxious, but that's a normal brain. It's just functioning properly.
Correct. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. So, people panic about that, but setting realistic expectations, like, we've had people say that it took them like a year to fully get better. It's not going to be this bad for the whole time. You're likely going to get better over the course of this year. But if you have some insomnia, or if you have some days where you feel really angry, hey, that's cool. Like, let's talk about it. And it's just temporary. Often the brain kind of will flare up and go down, when it's recovering from these injuries. And so just expect that, and we'll get you through it.
And I would have to assume too, like if 18 to 25 seems to be the range of like most common outbursts of this sort of stuff, people always say like, oh, they'll get back to their selves one day. Like, what is their self? You know what I mean? Like, you were 18 when you started this thing, and now you're 21. You're changing anyway. So like, you don't even know what your base level of personality is. And that could be troubling for the individual, but also like the family around them to be like, oh, I just want my blank back. You know what I mean? But that person would have been gone anyway. He's an adult now, or he's maturing. So I guess that that could be causing more prolonged healing of like just trying to find back a base level of self.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume you have to start working this person towards that.
Yeah, that's tricky to know, like who they,
who are they really?
Who are they really underneath? But I think for most people, like you have a general sense of what their personality is like, and they should be able to come back to a place where they can feel calm and they can sleep and they can feel good emotions and it's stable. And I think once you get there, it's like, hey, that's just where the chips are. You know,
you are who you are type of thing.
You are who you are at that point. Yeah,
a level of like comfortableness with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could also be an issue too, is with families. Everybody thinks that you are, I think, doing the right thing. So everybody wants the people around you to kind of act and be like you. And if you're not like you, you're like, oh, something's off with that person. But they're just different individuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I've seen this much. I mean, not just with the cannabis-induced psychosis. I mean, I take people who have been on antidepressants and antipsychotics for severe depression. I take them off meds in their 40s and 50s, and some of these people got on them when they were teens.
Wow.
And so, like, they are different people when they come off. A lot of them are really emotionally reactive because they have not, like most people going through, like, your late teens, early 20s, you really learn how to feel strong emotions and to manage them. Mm-hmm. And if you've just muted that for the last 2 decades, it's like you kind of muted your emotional maturation. And so we get people in their 40s teaching them how to be like, yeah, that's normal how you're feeling, this like level of hurt and discomfort, and here's what you need to do, and it's okay, because everything is coming back online again. And that can be really tricky for them because they're like, who the hell am I? Like, I was used to being kind of muted to stressful things in my family and my relationships, and now it's just like I have all these feelings which I never used to have before.
You notice a lot of like outbursts of like crying and anger.
Yeah, lots of tearfulness, yeah.
Do you have to talk to them as if they're adolescents? Like, hey, it's okay to be sad sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
That's so interesting.
I mean, the interesting thing about my practice is that we employ a lot of people who have been through this. And so half of the clinicians at the Taper Clinic have personal experience. You know, they've been on drugs for decades and have done their tapers and come off. And so they can talk to them in a really compassionate way where it's like, hey, I've been where you've been. I was on these meds for 20 years and this is what it was like for me. And you can kind of give them that hope where it's like, this is where I am today and there's nothing wrong with you, and you'll get through it.
The Taper Clinic, that's your practice?
That's my medical practice.
And you said you're hiring individuals who other doctors that have been through it, or? Oh
no, so it's yeah. So we have one psychiatrist on staff at the moment who has been on psychiatric meds and come off. But we also have like non-physicians, like we have like coaches.
Nice. Okay.
Like we have someone that does support for drug injuries. His name's Chris Page. He went through it. He was really sick for 7 years, recovering from a drug injury. He kind of helps people go through that. And so we try and find staff that have been on psychiatric medications and come off.
Makes sense. I mean, you mentioned it before. You experimented with the drugs you were providing your patients just to know how it feels. I mean, how could you talk to somebody and put them on a drug and they ask you the question like, well, what does it feel like? And you're like, I don't know. Yeah. Good luck, you know?
Yeah, I thought it was essential. I mean, I've taken ADHD meds. I've taken Zoloft, Mirtazapine, you know.
Which one's the worst?
Xanax.
Really?
Yeah, but Xanax I wasn't experimenting with. Xanax I took when I was sick because I think I was telling you earlier on, I was burning the candle on both ends. I was drinking a lot of coffee, and I stopped being able to sleep. And so I started taking Xanax. I got it from a nurse practitioner, within 6 months, it started to make me worse. I started to get really like strange, obsessive, sticky thoughts. Like all of the worst things that have ever happened in my life would like flash before my eyes, like randomly in the middle of the day, like these gross, sticky thoughts. And I just became more and more on edge. Thankfully, I didn't have issues coming off. I was lucky, but I got to experience firsthand becoming more anxious and more obsessive on Xanax, which is really common for a lot of people.
So why is Xanax and Zoloft so popular?
Xanax is popular because it feels good. Xanax is actually like addictive. Like you take it and you just like, oh yeah, you fall back into a cloud. It's great. Yeah. Zoloft is popular because it's just really easy to prescribe, and it's fast to manage people who are anxious with that medication.
Understood. Yeah. So you're saying when you took Xanax, in the moment you did enjoy the feeling it gave you.
Yeah.
Have you ever taken a drug that immediately you took it and said, this is the worst experience I've had?
Well, for me, I didn't like Zoloft. I thought Zoloft made me feel flat. Like it was like a total emotional flattener. And my wife hated me when I was on Zoloft. Like she would come into the house and start complaining about something. Like maybe I left a mess in the kitchen, or I don't know, like something, some emotional thing that I would have been aware of. Like it was, I didn't return her call, and it was like you should have known this was an important day for me because of X, Y, and Z. And
you just didn't care.
Yeah. And I was just, well, not only did I miss that, when she came and talked to me about it, I was just like, okay, I'm sorry about that. And she was just like, where are you? Like what is going on? She felt like I was less attuned to her emotions, right? Because like if you're in a relationship with someone and they come into the house, like you can tell they're pissed off. You can tell something is bothering them, and that's important because you need to go up to them and be like, hey, what's up? What's wrong? Help me. Like something feels off, and with some poking and prodding, they're like, oh well, you did this shit, and then you like kind of you work it out with them, and you come back together, and it's good. If you're taking a drug that blunts your emotions, you're less able to notice these subtle things that are happening in other people, and so they could walk around being pissed off, and you can't even.
You have no clue.
How
could you connect? It's like what was that drug? The ashwagandha was having similar effects to people. They were like, "Oh, this is this great relaxation drug and whatever," or a supplement that was natural and you take it before bed and whatever. And I took it. I didn't notice as extreme, but people were like, it made me numb. And but there was like the running meme joke of like somebody on ashwagandha, you're telling them like, your grandma died, and they're like, oh, it sucks. Like they just didn't care at all. I wonder if it had a similar effect.
Yeah, I mean, it feels good. It feels good to not be like kind
caring
of
about everything,
attuned to like the pain and the annoyance of your partner and stuff like that. And you're like, oh yeah, this feels like more comfortable, but it's shit for your relationship. I mean, there's like Facebook pages there's like a Facebook page called Marriages Ruined by SSRIs. It has like over 5,000 people in there who are just like, hey, we were in this loving relationship and we have kids, and my partner got on this medication and they're not the same. Now they want a divorce. Or sometimes the drugs will make people impulsive and manic. Oh, I found them like cheating now. And I think on face, a lot of people are just like, yeah, this is bullshit. People are just blaming drugs for relationships falling apart. But man, I've seen it and I felt it myself. Like these are mind-altering, personality-altering drugs. And yeah, no shit, they're going to have an effect on your relationship. Like that's really where this turns up.
This is not the person I started dating.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried any sort of like antipsychotic or mood stabilizer drugs?
I haven't taken any antipsychotics. And the only mood stabilizer I've taken is very low doses of lithium.
How'd that make you feel?
Good.
Really?
Yeah. Lithium orotate. It's very calming, especially if you're irritable. Yeah.
Where can you get that?
Online, Amazon. I mean, if you're someone who is on edge, I think lithium orotate has kind of an anti-neuroinflammation effect. And so, like for a kid, I think if like we use it for kids with ADHD sometimes as like a supplement, like 1 milligram twice a day is pretty good for a kid. For like an adult, like 5 milligrams of lithium orotate, it can be quite calming.
Why did you stop?
Because I don't like being reliant on like a supplement, because it's not like these things aren't like, hey, I'm deficient in lithium and I need to boost it up. Like there's a lot of things out there that are, I call them nutraceuticals. I mean, these are like natural things, natural elements, or over-the-counter stuff like ashwagandha or St. John's wort or lion's mane. Like these aren't like, I know they call them like adaptogens, so they're helping you manage stress or something like that. Yeah. But they're really just like drugs that have drug effects. And yeah, it's not coming from a pharmaceutical company, but if you take enough of a plant compound or a mineral or something like that, it will change your neurophysiology.
Sure, yeah.
It will induce a drug effect. And I just worry about that. I worry about that being because of all the reasons with the psychiatric drugs, that you adapt to it, that it wears off over time, that you could have side effects. And so I take it sometimes if I'm like really on edge, like this is like embarrassing. But if I've slept really poorly and I'm irritable and I have to take my daughter skiing because I'm just like, I want to go and like go fast. And she's like, and she's like so slow. And sometimes she's whinging because it's cold. I'm just like, I'm just going to take a lithium orotate because I know it'll like put me in a really mellow mood.
Really?
And I'll be able to just be like really chill on the mountain.
That's so those are one of those things that lithium got a horrible rap back in the day for like, that was the drug that they were putting a lot of people that were psychotic on, but it was like making them way worse, right? Like it was just too much. Was it a dose issue?
So it's a dose issue. So lithium orotate, so this lithium carbonate, which is what they use for mania.
Yeah.
And that can be like, people take like 600 to 900 milligrams. That's like, that's a lot. But with lithium orotate, like if I took 5, that's like 1 to 2 milligrams of carbonate. So it's a really small amount. It's enough to like tickle the receptors and get an effect, but it's nowhere near like the massive doses that you use to bring down someone with like mania.
Sure. Yeah. Do you need prescription for this or you can just buy it?
For orotate, no, it's an over-the-counter supplement.
Really?
Yeah.
Never even heard of this stuff. Yeah. I mean, I've heard of it, but I never thought that people can take it.
Yeah, you should try 5 milligrams lithium orotate. Just take it once a day and see how you
take
feel.
No, I don't want some.
Order some. We'll try it. We'll have a podcast. We'll sit and we'll take lithium and then we'll talk about our experiences. Yeah. We should just have a podcast where we take different drugs every time and then we sit here and wait for the effects to take over.
Yeah.
No, horrible idea. I am not down for that. I'm very. Again, when I would smoke when I was younger, same thing. I would notice everybody around me was having a great time and I'd be sitting in the corner like, I hate this. Yeah. I'm so anxious right now and I have so much paranoia. I'm never doing this again. So drugs, I'm very there was a reason the psychiatrist that I talked to at Amen Clinic, there was something, I forget what the receptor was, but I need an extremely low dose of any drug for me to feel the effects. Yeah. I forget what the, but anyway, so I tend to stay away from pretty much everything. Yeah. Just because of that reason.
We'll try the natural ones.
The lithium, that's a very interesting one. I'd never heard of that. Mm-hmm. Like, why is that not promoted more?
Because it's cheap and it's off patent, and yeah, there's, if you don't have $1 billion like drug industry behind it promoting it, most people tend to not hear about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what are some, like, if you had to list like 5 of the worst drugs that are pretty commonly used, what would that be?
Yeah, so I mean, benzodiazepines long term, so that's Xanax, Klonopin. They make people more anxious over time, agoraphobic, like they don't want to go outside and do things. You start to get obsessive thoughts. And so I think benzos are really bad news. SSRIs used long term, I worry about a lot because Zoloft, Paxil, Lexapro, they tend to make people develop brain fog and start to feel really tired. And so that, and many people will miss that, and they'll go and see their doctor, and the doctor will say, you have treatment-resistant depression, now we need to stack on more drugs or put you on Wellbutrin, something to like pick you up. But long-term, I've seen them really cause a lot of fatigue and brain fog. And then antipsychotics. So one of the scary things with antipsychotics is they're given a lot for like adverse reactions. And so you'll get someone who's put on an ADHD med or like an SSRI. And sometimes these meds will cause like mania or even subtle forms of it where people will feel like very irritable, on edge, impulsive. And many doctors will miss that they've had a side effect to the antidepressant or the ADHD med, and they'll say, oh, you have bipolar. And then they put them on antipsychotics. So they put them on like Abilify, Seroquel, olanzapine. And these drugs, I think I mentioned, they shrink the brain. You have a 5% chance per year of taking it to develop a movement disorder that can be permanent. Wow. And it can also cause massive weight gain. And so, those would be the main ones that I'm worried about.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. So taking something like an Adderall, say, like let's say I'm recreationally taking it because a lot of people do nowadays, and you have this irritability side effect, that could be a side effect of the drug that people are just missing, and then doctors are diagnosing with something else.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I'm helping someone right now who was taking Vyvanse and she had, a manic episode. And,
wow.
And they're like, oh, you have bipolar. It's like, no, she doesn't have bipolar. Like she was on a stimulant and it's right there in the drug label that it can cause mania.
Now, let me ask some. So this individual that just doesn't seem to react well to Vyvanse, will that happen without fail, or are there going to be times where she could take Vyvanse 10 times and on the 11th try, then she catches a side effect?
Yeah, yep, exactly. So I like to think about it as, it's like imagine like a thermometer that's gonna or something that's gonna boil over. Like, it can stack sometimes. So it's like maybe at this dose it's fine, but at this dose, now, like, if you have a couple days of poor sleep and something stressful is going on, now it's gonna boil over and you get it. Some people, they take the drugs long term, and then it can affect their brain over time, and maybe you didn't have a side effect for the first couple of years, but now you, for whatever reason, you've become more sensitized to it. So yeah, but generally it will happen with like dose changes, or like when you start a new higher dose, that will be the thing that pushes someone over.
Right, but if you introduce a drug to your system for the first time and you have a side effect, that normally means that...
Yeah, that normally means that's not a great drug for you.
You shouldn't try to push through that.
You shouldn't, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Because I've taken, even like consuming liquor, there's plenty of moments where if I'm not in a good mental state and I go out and try to drink it off, I'm in a horrible state of mind. It's just like exacerbating what I'm already experiencing with whenever you feel like taking like an Adderall or things like that.
We were talking about that
caffeine
before.
Too, right? Exactly.
With caffeine, it's like sometimes we use these substances to escape bad mental states, but they can make it worse. I mean, if you go into it and you're like underslept and you're kind of like maybe like sick and feeling like shit, there's like an even better chance that when you have a couple drinks or you drink a strong coffee, it's going to carry you in the wrong direction. It's not going to like pull you out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big coffee drinker, so I'm not asking this question in the hopes of hearing your answer, but is there overlooked side effects of consuming caffeine, or are we just caffeinated up in this society and we just don't really care about it?
There are. I mean, the things that I worry about with caffeine and it is just that we get ourselves into this just hyper stimulated state. Like if we're on coffee and then we're on social media all day and we're just like revved up, like a lot of people out there have shit sleep nowadays. And this is like the main area that I see it turn up, or they'll be really irritable. And if you're just consuming a lot of caffeinated products, like that can be a gateway drug for some people into getting an anxiety disorder and meds, because most people, they're not sleeping enough, they're drinking through it with coffee, and they're just like, oh my God, now they're so keyed up, they're misinterpreting things in their relationship's struggling, and they go to the doctor and they put them on Lexapro, and it's like, no, tell the person to cut down the coffee, go to sleep on time, eat healthy food and move their body, and a lot of it will go away. So, I mean, every single randomized controlled trial I've seen with caffeine and nicotine products, it shows that it decreases sleep. And so, especially if you consume after 10 p.m., you're going to cut your sleep duration by about 30 minutes or so, and that adds up over time. I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot, but
I mean, 10 p.m. if you're drinking coffee, you got a problem.
Yeah, and so it's just there's less sleep, there's more of a toll on your body, and so if you are consuming caffeinated products, try and keep it to the morning before 10 a.m. and then just like let it get out of your system.
Let it get out of your system by the time you go to bed. You mentioned randomized controlled trials, and I know you worked at the FDA for a while. I'm so curious to know more about how those even work, right? So you're trying to test out a new drug, and you're hoping that I take it consistently in the right dosage, and you're hoping that I live a consistent lifestyle with how you want me to live. How are you controlling these things? Like, how effective are these randomized controlled trials really?
Yeah, so they can be very so they're very effective, but it depends on how they're designed to make sure you get the right answer. And so the reason for randomized controlled randomized, and the other part is double-blind placebo-controlled trial is so the first part of that randomized means like you recruit a whole bunch of patients, but no one picks which arm they go into. So for a drug trial, it's either the active treatment or a placebo. Now, the reason you want it to be randomized is you don't want like someone just being like, oh, this person is like sicker, so we're going to put them on the drug because I think they need it, and then they want to do a moral thing, and then all of a sudden the drug looks worse than the placebo because it's been stacked. And so we want to completely remove that that bias. And so randomized means no one knows where the patients go. And that should make sure that we have two groups that have identical characteristics, like no one's put their finger on the scale. Now, double blind is really important because that means that when done correctly, the patients don't know what treatment they're getting, and also the researchers who are looking at, who are judging them, don't know what they're getting. And this is important because, like, let's say you're looking at which group gets more side effects, but this person who's reporting this side effect, they're on the placebo. You might not record it in the data sheet. You might say,
"Got it."
Because you're like, I know they're not getting it, and that also skews the measurement. And so we want people blind. And so now, what happens then is, the hypothesis is, they're not all living the same life. I mean, they could say, hey, we're not going to drink, we're, all this stuff, but they don't really care about that. It's like, you're enrolled in the study. We've got enough people that hopefully those differences in your lifestyle and everything outside of the study, they kind of balance each other out. But the one thing that we are going to do is we're going to put you on this drug and we're going to put you on this placebo, and then we're going to see what happens at the end of 2 months if we're talking about an antidepressant study. And because we've randomized it and it's double blind, there's no biases there. And so if you look at the level of depression in the two groups at the end of this period of time, you should be able to say, hey, the only thing that was different was this group got the drug and this group didn't get the drug, and we can believe that outcome. Now, the reason why this is kind of bullshit for antidepressants is a couple reasons. So with antidepressant studies, they don't measure life improvement. They measure the reduction of symptoms on a scale. And that's important if someone's like less depressed, but really, they're just saying, if you give someone a drug that kind of blunts them, they have lower symptoms, but they're not looking at life satisfaction. They're not looking at relationships. They're not looking at meaning in your life. And so when people say antidepressants work from the clinical trials, that's just that they bring the symptoms down. They bring the symptoms down a little bit. Now, the other issue, which is the thing that's the most frightening, is these trials last about 8 weeks. Now, 70% of people who use these medications are on them for 2 years or longer. And so that's a big mismatch, because who the hell knows what happens long term?
After 2 months, right?
Yeah. So there's just this big, and it's like, because everyone knows the drugs wear off over time, and also that maybe it's bad for the brain to be on drugs for 2 years straight, and so we don't even know the answer to those questions about what happens after a year. 1 year is the longest these drugs were ever studied for in that type of design.
It's also subjective. Like, how do you know that I'm happy? If I rate on a scale 1 to 5, if you ask me if I'm happy or not, I'd say yes, but I don't know if I'm more or less happy than I was 2 years ago. Like, it's very hard for me. And I don't know if I'm more or less happy than you. Well, how are we comparing the two?
Johnny, it's a really good point. And that's why people are calling for more objective measures. Like, how are they doing in relationships?
Sure, right.
How much money how many days have they spent in psychiatric hospitals? How much money have they spent on mental health care? These would be ways of looking at these two groups and just saying, there are other ways that they could be different, which is important. And we don't do that right now.
Yeah. So your work at the FDA, is it as corrupt as people make it seem to be?
I think there is I'm going to say there's like capture, like cultural and ideological capture. And I have to talk about this in a broader sense. So most people who work at the FDA come out of academic medical centers. So these are researchers, and usually it's burnt out researchers who are tired of writing grants, and they go, I'm going to work for the government because I love research and I don't have to like go through that process, which is rude. But academic doctors are heavily influenced by the pharmaceutical company, and this is because early, like if you're an academic, you want to become a professor. You start at a low rank, and the way to become a professor is you want to publish a whole bunch of papers, and you want to be invited to talk internationally. Mm-hmm. If you put all of that stuff in your CV, you can make the case to the head of your school that I am a world expert in this area. I mean, look at all my publications. Look at all the places I've been invited to. Mm-hmm. Now, the best way to do that right now is to work with drug companies, and that's because they do most of the research. And like you could put in a grant to the National Institute of Mental Health, and it's super competitive, and you try and get money from them, and you lose, and you've invested hundreds of hours on this grant.
Yeah.
Or you could just say, hey, drug companies, do you need help running your clinical trials? And they said, oh, yeah, we'll do that. And on top of that, we're going to write the protocol. We're going to give you administrative support staff. We're going to write the manuscript for you later. We're going to handle the submission. And then we're also going to fly you around the world to talk about this. So if you work with the drug companies, all of a sudden it's like they've made it so much easier for you to advance in your career. Yeah. And so most of the academics in the US, and I'll say the world right now, are very biased towards biological psychiatry, drug company research, because that's the way to help their career. Mm-hmm. And so and so when you are like kind of tethered to the drug companies, you, like a smart person, you know there's certain things that I'm not going to say because I'm not going to fit in with the other people here. Like I'm not going to talk about the risks of the drugs because that's going to be frowned upon. If I start doing that, drug companies aren't going to ask me to help them with their clinical trials. And so they self-censor, and they very quickly learn that, hey, we don't talk about these issues. We talk about a pro-drug message. And it is from that basket that people enter the FDA. So when I was at the FDA, most of the people there they acted more like advocates for the drugs. So essentially parroting drug company language, because anytime someone said something was bad with a drug companies will run like cover media that will say, these people, they're stigmatizing the mentally ill, you know, we need more research, like all of the kind of talking points to shut down controversy. At the FDA, most of the people were like that. They behaved in a way that, like, we need to protect the drugs, people who criticize them, they're dangerous, stigmatizing the mentally ill. And so I felt like they didn't really take the actual mission seriously. And so they were ideologically captured by the drug company. And so that's what I noticed. I found them very ineffectual.
It's just like you kind of fell in line. Like that's where you have to be, and then it's like the machine, and you got to cover up the machine now, and you can't really go against it because nobody has the money to beat the billions of dollars that they have.
Yeah, and you're like an academic at the FDA, so you're at the FDA, and like everyone who is a giant in your field, they're all in bed with the drug companies, right. And none of them are saying this. And so do you want to go out of your way and say something different that makes them look bad? All of a sudden you're out of the club. And we want to self-preserve. We want to be liked. We want to play nice in the sandbox with others.
Yeah.
And so this is the big thing that many people don't realize. They're like, scientists, they're hard-nosed and they stand up for the truth. No, we're people as well, and we fall prey to wanting to fit in and do well in our careers and look after our families. And unfortunately, sometimes that's at the expense of the public and being honest about the drugs.
Did you have any of those like out-of-the-club moments where you felt like, I just completely disagree with what's going on?
Oh, yeah. I've been having them like from my second year of residency, and then I had to learn to kind of tone it down to survive. And it was only when I completely went out independently on my own that I was able to finally essentially blow the whistle on like, hey, a lot of what we're doing is a total scandal.
Normally referring to like the SSRIs and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
SSRIs, just the whole philosophy and the overuse of the drugs like that. I only felt comfortable truly letting it rip once I was like, I have my own business, I'm not going to get fired or anything like that. Yeah.
It's weird because I would assume most doctors feel the same way you feel. So hearing you stand up, why did more people not join and be like, hey, we all know he's right. Yeah. It's not like it's even a conversation anymore. Like it's pretty clear that your stance is on the right side.
I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, Johnny, because so most doctors don't have my luxury. Like I'm in private practice. I have a business that works. But the majority of physicians in the US, they work in the insurance company, and
Sure.
so they are like, to make ends meet, I need to see 4 people an hour, and the only way I can see 4 people an hour is by using these medications. Because
I got it.
and so when you've been like doing that to like thousands of people, and you just catch up with them a couple times a year and adjust the meds, like, I don't know, you don't really want to hear this, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, diet and all of this, like, how am I going to do that? And so I think they just suppress it and push it away, because it's like, hey, that's just not practical for me. I just need to keep on doing what I'm doing.
Right. At the end of the day, that they're worried about themselves, which they should be, right? Like, it's their life. They're not going to now like try to stir up their own life at the risk of losing their job and not making money. They need to just go about their day normally.
Yeah, I mean, one of my friends he started practicing in this way, doing more holistic type care and spending more time with the patients, and he was kicked out of his practice. The other partners in the medical group were just like, why are you spending so much time with these patients? Your billable hours have gone down, like, this needs to change. And he's like, no, I'm not practicing like that anymore. And he was just booted. Like,
really?
Yeah. So I mean, it really is, you have to keep the billable hours up. Well, essentially, 4 people per hour to generate that revenue.
Yeah, and I guess you gotta feed the machine, like we said. Let's talk. I mean, because we talked about anxiety and depression being correlated, but it seems like ADHD and anxiety are also correlated. Why is that?
Let me think about that for a moment. I think, I don't know. Yeah, I think for some, I know it's correlated. I think anxiety and ADHD, especially in women, I mean, a lot of these things overlap, to be honest. Like, ADHD overlaps, with anxiety and sometimes depression.
But they're not causing the other. They're just both issues.
Well, so none of these things are really like distinct entities with well understood underlying, like, things like chemical imbalances, right? And so, okay, let's say, for instance, you have a kid who is, is like, went through some trauma growing up. Like, that kid's going to have a hard time concentrating in school if he's getting flashbacks of awful things that are happening.
That makes sense.
If they're in a traumatic house. If someone is grieving, they're going to have a hard time thinking, and they're going to have a hard time concentrating. And you could also have it going the other way. Like, if someone's really struggling in school and now they're or struggling in work, that can make them more anxious. And you can also have people who are just having like physical problems, like their diet is shit, they're not moving their body, they're too caffeinated, and they have some like brain fog, and they also have some anxiety. It's just all, they just overlap so much. Yeah.
So it's hard to determine, like, okay, you have displaying symptoms of ADHD, right? Can't focus. He's lack of motivation certain times, and you don't necessarily know if that is all caused by because he's thinking of the trauma that he experienced in his past, or he just has this thing. So you don't necessarily know. You just want to blanket fix both at the same time, I would have to assume. And it's not like every time the trauma is then going to lead into ADHD symptoms. So it's like this weird situation that you could have both, you could have one that's causing the other. There's so many different circumstances.
Yeah. I always like to think, like, let's just move all of the diagnoses off the table and understand the person's life, right?
Right.
So if you're just like, okay, so this kid is kind of anxious, they kind of have some inattentive issues, then it's like, you go through it, just like, you bring in the mom and dad, like, what's the home life like? Are things cool at home? Okay, they're cool at home. Does this kid have a history of trauma? Like, are we sure? Okay. What are they eating? Are they moving their body? And then it's like, hey, is this kid like pretty fine and happy at home, but they really just struggle at school, and the school is just not interesting for them, and maybe they're much more physical and they're a hands-on person, and we need to like not make him feel bad about getting a C in math, because that's not that big of a deal.
Sure.
And he's going to find something better. Is this like anxiety because it's just this cultural expectation, and you're a high achieving family, and your kid has now learned unless they excel in school and make this much money that like they're going to be worthless, and that's really just not a good way of looking at it. And so you just want to break. I think the root of it just starts with like understanding it, like at a psychological level, also like the physical things, their physical health, and just sweep all the diagnoses off the table and just help the person. Yeah.
So and that makes a ton of sense. Instead of the diagnosis, let's maybe focus on most common symptoms that people are experiencing today that they determine are problems, right? So I would say in today's day and age, it's like this lack of motivation, this lack of self-worth, this lack of confidence, this brain fog, all these things that if you had ADHD, Adderall or Vyvanse would fix in the moment, right? You take an Adderall and you have this, you're going to feel much better.
Yeah.
What would you recommend instead of just throwing somebody on Adderall?
Yeah, I mean, dive into it. I mean, there's so many things there. Like if it's, if it's dietary or they're not moving their body, do that. But it's also like, okay, so you have like low self-esteem because like, man, when I turn on Instagram, I just see guys down in like Miami just like making it rain and sports cars, and it's like, hey, listen, like that's social media, and it takes. Like you could spend decades finding a mission worth fighting for, and that's okay, and so also so whatever that issue is that you identify, you need to. So this is where professionals can come in. If you can ask the right questions and understand the person, you will be able to find like what's going on, and then for some people it might be like, hey, get off social media, go and talk to people in real life who have done what you've done, what you want to do, and that might help you feel better. Like yeah. If you're really low in motivation, I mean that could be like you don't like what you're doing, or it could also just be like your physical health is shit, and you need to work on your sleep and all the things that you're doing, and bring that back into alignment, and then you'll have more energy again.
The lack of motivation one is super interesting to me because I think it's so common. And maybe the reasons are, like you said, everybody's on social media and you can lie to yourself and say, oh, that life, whatever that's what I want to do. But at your core, you don't want to go and do that. So now you wake up every day chasing that dream that you think you have, and you're lying to yourself. Like, I don't even enjoy this thing. So there's no excitement for the day, because even when you go and achieve the task that you thought you wanted to do, you didn't want to go and do it. So maybe taking a step back from the social media and having conversations with yourself and a higher power, if that's what you believe in, and just really understanding what aligns with you as a person,
Yeah, and I mean, this is like I worry about the decline in religious attendance in the U.S. because I think it was about 50%, I think it was 80 years ago, and I think we're just about 30% religious attendance, but it's mostly older individuals. And in most of the religion, I'm not just talking about Christianity, I'm a Christian, but for most of the religion, like a very big principle is living a life in service of others.
Yep.
Like, and I think, when you're not hearing that and you're not seeing that in your community, helping others, charity, fighting a mission worth fighting for, you could get sucked into the Miami TikTok bullshit where it's like, if you're a guy, it's just like, I just have to make it rain. I'm going to do drop shipping. And like, you don't really give a shit about drop shipping. Right. Or if you're a girl, you're just like, my whole value is like based on my beauty, instead of being wise or compassionate or kind, or many of these religious values that we used to instill within our communities. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I think a lot of joy comes into doing work that is meaningful and helps other people. And obviously, ideally it makes a living as well. But I would like to see us guide younger people in that way, like help them, like, how can I leave the world a better place? Because that usually makes you feel good. And if you're fighting a mission worth fighting for, like the people that will turn up and do that with you, you'll just feel connected to them. I have so many great friends doing this because I'm obsessed with the psychiatric drug harm, that like the people that I work with, I feel really close to, and it's like a very good community. And so I think many things fall into place when you work on real problems that you care about.
Do you notice a common thread with your patients that then lean on religion, all of a sudden feeling getting better? I might talk about this more in my clinical work. Until now, like
it's been more of a personal thing and not something that I've kind of I've brought into it. I do think spirituality is very important, but I'm gonna have to start noticing that more because I'm not looking at that with my patients as closely.
It is so interesting. Again, like you mentioned, you start aligning with people with your mission, and me as a faith-based person and diving into my faith more, I just feel a better connection. I don't even have to ask you the question, are you a Christian or not? I just feel better around you and talking to you when you are versus when you're not. It just seems like you have such a resistance to this thing for whatever reason. Instead of just surrendering your life to a higher power, and like you said, how can I, instead of worrying about serving my own flesh and self, how can I serve others? And now your priority is other people. You do have this like weird sense of excitement and purpose throughout your day, because it's so much less about what's out there that is lying to you and saying this is what you should be wanting versus what your soul actually wants.
Yeah. A religious community is great because they also, like, if you surround yourself with people who just truly value that, it's like you're not getting all this reinforcement. It's like, okay, who gives a shit that you drive this fancy car? Like, people are more just like,
yeah,
this is a great person. You know, this is living a life in service of God and service of others and all of that. And I mean, that's a really nice community to be a part of, people that cheer each other on for those things. Because, like, not everyone can attain, you know, if you're a woman, you know, great beauty. Right. And if you're a man, not everyone can attain, you know, millions of dollars or something. Really, but we can all attain helping others, charity, all of those things. And so, you know, a community that values that, I think, leads to higher self-esteem. And I think for people, because it's all attainable. And I think in the US, especially on social media, we've veered away from that to, it's like, no, you aren't worth shit unless you are just like minting money and you're gorgeous, like, and anything else, like, you know, you just suck.
That's such a good point that everyone can serve. Not everyone can be the lead actor in this play of life. And I remember reading, and it's pretty talked about in Christianity too, but I remember reading the Daily Stoic, and one of the pages was play your role in a weird way. And I think a lot of times people have a hard time accepting and being self-aware of who you are and what you really want to be doing. Not everybody wants to be the lead role, but we're now shoved down our throats. No, you have to go and achieve that thing. If you don't achieve that thing, you're a loser. If you're focusing on that as like your metric of, am I living a fruitful life? A lot of people, maybe the top guys that are the lead actors, are going to be satisfied, but the other people are going to be like, well, I lost to that person.
Yeah, I'm depressed, or, you know, and I have this problem, or I'm neurodivergent or something.
Right,
like
exactly.
That.
And I lean on an excuse instead of just being
these things. It's like, this is my excuse for not meeting this societal expectation that's just I'm just being hit with all the time.
Yeah, but everyone can serve. I mean, you go to a church and it's such a humbling experience, because I walk in there, no one cares about how much money I just made, how many girls I've been with, what my life looks like outside of this. Everybody wants to just preach and praise the Lord, and it's a really, really, it could be a hard feeling for people that aren't used to it, because you're like, no, what do you mean? Nobody knows how rich I am? Like, guys, look at me. That's what makes me special, right? But you're not special in the house of God. You know, you have to humble yourself. But then once you get to that equilibrium, it's a really peaceful feeling to know that we're all kind of on the same level.
Yeah. It's so grounding. I
grounding
feel
is
like,
the word, yeah.
I mean, there's been a loss of traditional values, but then when you walk into a church, it's like, you know, live a life in service of others. You're constantly reminded of the importance of family and starting a family, and, you know, like, I feel like life just seems simpler. Like when there's, you know, a book and rules and, you know, a way of moving through the world.
It's hard though, man, because I mean, even me, I can admit, while I am Christian and believe, I've predicated my life on success looks like making money. And genuinely what brings me happiness now is more views and more money. Like, I know that there's a direct correlation. If I see more money in my bank account, I am happier on the surface. So now I got to like rewire my brain to say that doesn't matter. Or I have to rewire my brain and say that matters, but for different reasons why you think it matters. It's not to then show it off, it's to then give and service other people. And so that's where I'm right now in life. I'm like, do I stop looking for the thing that brings me happiness, and do I look for happiness in other places, or do I try to rewire why that thing is bringing me happiness?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's problems with making money, but ideally you're able to make money by doing work that it helps the world.
Right.
And like right now, I'm like, for instance, I'm trying to save up money because I want to open like a residential or a hospital facility, and I'm just like, it's going to be so cool.
Pretty good use of money.
Yeah, I'm gonna be able to help people and be
Right.
surrounded by like, because I don't like remote work. I mean, I've been remote working for like 7 years now, and it's just like it's so overrated. I couldn't think of anything cooler than being on like a hospital grounds surrounded by people who are working on the same mission.
Right.
And it's like, so, you know, one cool thing about money is the more money that you have, oftentimes the more you can help.
Yeah.
And so if you can, you know, make money, then usually you can, I mean, you could do things like this. I mean, I'm very grateful that you've had me on to speak with your audience, and that's something you've been able to do because you've been successful. And I think this is a good message and all of that. And I think the more successful you are, then sometimes you have a bigger megaphone to change the world and do good things.
That's a really good point. And you asked me before, like, my audience and the type of content we put out there. And at the end of the day, it's like, how am I servicing and impacting other people's lives? What type of information am I putting into the world that is so toxic nowadays, especially on social media? Am I doing things just for the views and clicks? Am I having OnlyFans models on and asking these clickbaity questions, or am I having people on that are genuinely going to have a good impact? If one person can watch this episode and say, you know what, I am now helped or inspired to help because of the conversation they had, and that's a win for me. You know,
Yeah.
So Doc, I appreciate you coming on seriously and taking the trip up from Washington, D.C., but we do ask our guests 2 questions to wrap up the podcast.
Okay.
Throughout your entire life, doesn't have to be doctorate related, what has been the lowest of your low and what has been the highest of your high?
Let me think. Lowest of the, I've never been asked that before. I mean, I think, I mean, the lowest of my low is after I finished medical school and before I started residency. I hope this doesn't feel like a cop-out. I wasn't engaged in work for 6 months, and I was just living a very hedonistic lifestyle. I was just like, I finished work, there's nothing to do. I was just going out and partying all the time, and I've never felt worse than I did in that time. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it was like, I just need to be engaged in something. I need to be busy. And if I'm not busy, my mind goes wild. And so that period of my life, I look back and I was like, that was awful. The highest of the high is, I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's like, I mean, there's a couple things like that stick out to me when we were successful enough that my wife didn't need to work anymore. That was really cool. I loved that. I mean, just like little things. I mean, I think about teaching my daughter how to read. It's just like little moments where it's like, oh shit, she just read that whole book by herself. She gets it, and so I like that. I've been able to make my wife and daughter happy and do those things. Yeah,
that's awesome. Normally the answer is related to the wife or the kids, so you're pretty consistent with everybody else.
Yeah,
which is great. It gives me something to look forward to in life.
Yeah.
Where can they find you?
Yeah, so www.taperclinic.com is our medical practice. We're in the 15 most populous states, including New Jersey and New York, this kind of area.
All right.
And I'm on all social medias, and you just search Dr. Josef. It's spelt in the German way, so it's Josef.
Got it.
And YouTube is by far our biggest platform. We do deep dives into all of these issues that we talked about today, and we have playlists that are full of tapering tips if you want to come off medications and find out how to do that safely. The Dr. Josef YouTube channel is the place to go.
Dr. Josef YouTube, okay. That's why it's called Taper.
Yeah.
Oh,
drug taper. Yeah.
All right.
Not tapeworm.
Right, but taper. That's okay. Yeah. I got it now. It took me 2.5 hours to get it, but I finally got it. That's it for today, everybody. Like, subscribe, share. Peace.